Chapter 1 Boom. With a loud noise, the huge spotlight suddenly turned on, and the dazzling white light dispelled the darkness, and everything could be seen at a glance in an instant. Wen Jianyan shrank back subconsciously, raising her hand to block the sudden bright light. The next live broadcast will start in 5 minutes. An emotionless female voice sounded, and the piercing sound rolled and echoed in the narrow space. Wen Jianyan blinked belatedly. Although there was still buzzing in his ears, the messy light spots on the edge of his field of vision gradually dissipated. What's the situation? After a few seconds, his eyes finally adjusted to the too harsh light. This is a room with a maximum of 5 square meters. He is standing in the middle of the room right now, with nothing beside him. The walls on all sides are completely transparent, and a bright red countdown is flashing on the glass, which is slowly rotating and moving around him at this moment. 4:25 4 minutes and 25 seconds. The numbers decrease evenly, giving a sense of imminent unease. Wen Jianyan stared at the camera in the room thoughtfully for 2 seconds. Immediately afterwards, he withdrew his gaze, took a step forward slowly, and looked out through the gap between the numbers. Outside is an endless pure white space, with hundreds of thousands of identical small rooms floating there. Each room has a person locked up, and a bright red countdown is displayed on the wall. Outside the small room, there are large and small cameras in all directions. Some are as tall as buildings, some need to be embraced by several people, and some are only as big as a palm. Countless cold metal circles shone with a strange luster under the light. Silently watching the prisoners held in each room give people a feeling as if they are being monitored by a different kind. Simply creepy. The prisoners in the small grid have different expressions. Wen Jianyan found that all the trapped people closest to him were pale, dazed and terrified, curled up in a corner of the room, and even collapsed in fear, screaming hysterically under the strange camera, beating the transparent glass desperately. Wall. Glass blocks out sound. It was like watching an absurd pantomime. The people in the distance were basically expressionless, calmly waiting for the end of the countdown, and they didn't know if they were used to it or they had long been numb. At this moment, a lively voice sounded, interrupting Wen Jianyan's meditation. "Hi, new anchor, I am your personal assistant, and I will serve you from today on." Wen Jianyan was startled, and turned to look in the direction of the voice. He saw a palm-sized light screen rise up, with his own resume printed on it. Photos, names, and even curriculum vitae. It is detailed and comprehensive, almost covering his entire life, even including the experience that does not belong to the name Wen Jianyan, but he has actually experienced it, and no one knows about it except himself. Wen Jianyan subconsciously pursed her lips, looked down 10 lines at a glance, and paused for a few seconds on the last sentence of the resume. Sign a sole contract with Nightmare Studio and become an active rookie anchor. The voice sounded again. The A-Class live broadcast room is being opened for you. The exclusive live broadcast room 789326QWK has been opened. The empty live broadcast background appeared on the light screen, and the number of online viewers was displayed in the lower right corner. 0. Can I ask a question? Wen Jianyan has a good voice. Clear and shallow, magnetic and soft, it can become deep and ambiguous with a little pressure, skillfully controls the comfortable articulation rhythm, and can almost easily win the favor and trust of anyone. Certainly. The young man raised his eyes. His eyes are a gentle amber color, with a little clear light. They appear lighter in color under strong light, and have a deceptively harmless feeling. Distress, can the live broadcast room be renamed? He looked a little embarrassed, and added shyly, the current name is ugly. A question that shouldn't arise at all on this occasion. After a brief pause of a few seconds, the assistant replied, not for now. However, after reaching a certain amount of points in the account, the System Point Mall will be opened for you, and you can spend points to buy a name-changing card at that time. The other party seemed to have no malice, and continued lively, I hope to be able to serve you again then. Thanks. Wen Jianyan raised his eyes, looked at the camera above his head, and smiled briefly and happily. The thin and light red lips curled up in a small arc, revealing a smile from the heart, and the dark pupils shrunk under the strong light, showing sincerity and authenticity. I hope to see you again soon, too. The scarlet countdown on the glass wall finally returned to 0. The voice sounded again, echoing in the empty white world, as if it was being surrounded by layers from all directions. It was deafening and frightening. Welcome to the Nightmare Live Broadcast Room, the next live broadcast will start soon. The already extremely dazzling spotlight suddenly became brighter, crazily overloaded, like the brilliance of countless suns being condensed in a narrow room. The metal ring of the camera was almost half melted in the strong light, and the lens stretched, as if living creatures. Wen Jianyan had to close his eyes. Through the bright red thin eyelids that were illuminated, the light that made his eyes hurt could not be completely blocked, causing pain like needle pricks. The mechanical female voice at the beginning became full of emotion. Our aim is entertainment to death. The live broadcast has started. There are countless channels connected to the huge live broadcast plaza, and each channel leads to a different live broadcast hall. Each hall is densely packed with countless small screens. Spectator picks. There are so many new anchors this time, so excited. This is the most newcomers introduced in the live broadcast room, right? I have never seen so many live broadcasting halls below D level in the square before. There are so many newcomers, so it is estimated that there should not be many level and above plazas open this time, right? I'm so disappointed. What's so interesting about the newcomer, screaming and running away? I don't believe in the old three ways. I'll let the old anchor start the broadcast. Of course, the old anchor is highly entertaining, but after all, they are all familiar faces, and I am tired of watching them also. Those rookies' expression of despair and collapse after realizing their current situation. I really can't get enough of it. Ha 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 ha. You are right, screams and blood also have their charms among them. A live broadcast hall named Duck AI Middle School was opened. A blood red logo flashed under the dungeon name. Hall difficulty rating, D. The highest unlock progress in history, 72% viewing value, E. At the bottom, there is a small sign with a few lines written in bronzing letters, for the viewing experience of you and others. All viewers are requested to abide by the rules in the live broadcast room, and spoilers are prohibited. After a short period of dizziness, Wen Jianyan opened his eyes. The fan on the top of the head is whistling and humming like exhausted. If you look directly at it for too long, you will feel dizzy. The young man had broad shoulders and long legs, lying on his back on a narrow bed, squeezed a little restrained. He stood up and looked around silently. This is an old-fashioned student dormitory. The walls are crooked and dirty, covered with wallpaper that cannot be seen in its original color. Crumpled, dirty dark brown and dirty yellow water stains seep from below. There are 4 bunk beds in the narrow room, and the rusty red is peeling off the iron railing. A mirror with one corner missing was attached to the cabinet on the opposite bed. The surface of the mirror was dirty, with greasy handprints left, and only blurred figures could be printed in the dim light. On the side table are piles of messy books, covered with dust. And Wen Jianyan was lying on the lower bunk of one of the beds. There was an indescribable strange smell in the air, which made it hard to breathe. In the lower right corner of the line of sight is a translucent light screen. Live room 789326QWK status, broadcast online audience, 3. The number of online viewers fluctuates between 0 and 3. No one posted barrage, as if they just clicked in to watch a lively and boring audience. There was no one else in the room except him. Wen Jianyan lowered her eyes, her long and straight eyelashes cast a little shadow on her white face. There was no excess emotion on her face, and she seemed extremely calm. He rolled out of bed. Then holding on to the table beside him, he began to retch. The back under the young man's shirt trembled slightly with the sound of vomiting, and he held his arm on the edge of the table with force, and the veins on his well-defined forearm burst out. After a long time, he finally stopped. The mask of ease and calmness at the beginning was shattered and collapsed and disappeared like melting snow. The corners of the young man's eyes were wet and red, and his facial features, which had been calm before, became vivid in an instant, appearing extraordinarily fragile and helpless in the dirty mirror. Help! That's right! What calm, what calm! It's all fake! Wen Jianyan's inner activities don't match the above adjectives at all. Any normal person would be terrified when they saw the previous scene. Red countdown, malicious broadcast sound, weird cameras big and small. No matter how you look at it, it looks like a picture that only appears in a horror novel. Not to mention how scary it is. Not to mention that he is still the kind of person who cherishes his life the most. However, in many years of professional career, Wen Jianyan has developed the habit of never leaking anything on the surface, no matter how scared he is in his heart or how much pressure from the outside world. It is even said that the closer one is to the brink of extinction, the more calm one will be. Otherwise, he would have been put in a cement bucket and sunk in the sea 800 years earlier. Wen Jianyan, a professional fraudster. After completing the biggest order in his life and successfully absconding with a multinational smuggling group with a huge sum of 2 billion yuan, he became a newcomer anchor in the horror live broadcast room without warning. How can anyone in the world be more unlucky than him? Wen Jianyan wrinkled his facial features into a ball, suppressing the frustration welling up in his heart. He wiped the corners of his mouth and straightened up. At this moment, the voice without emotion sounded again. In order to improve your live broadcast experience, the live broadcast room will customize a unique novice gift for you according to the soul quality of the anchor. In such a penetrating environment, the mechanical sound seemed even more strange this time. However, the keywords of soul quality and customization in this passage immediately made Wen Jianyan feel that it was extraordinary. He subconsciously took a slight breath. Based on years of professional experience, this so-called novice gift is likely to play a vital role in his fate. Ding! The novice gift package has been delivered. Has the host signed for it? Wen Jianyan made up his mind and said, "Sign for receipt." He saw the light screen in front of him flash, and a colorful gift box popped open automatically. Amidst the lively sound effects, the gorgeous long silk was torn off automatically, the gift box bounced open with a bang, and the animation interface disappeared, revealing a flower pot. The clay-gray flower pots, the brown-black soil, are unremarkable and featureless. Other than that it was empty, nothing. Wen Jianyan. What? He poked at the flower pot on his screen in disbelief, hoping to find something else. A line of text popped up. Product name, Apple Seedlings Wen Jianyan. So, what is this custom made according to the attributes of the soul, and it sounds very bluffing. Is it an apple seedling that hasn't sprouted yet? What a piece of crap! This is the gift for newbies? Be sick! Wen Jianyan turned off the light screen expressionlessly. He raised his head, and subconsciously glanced at the place where he had just been lying with his peripheral vision, and his gaze couldn't help but pause slightly. A card lay quietly on the pillow. The card is very thin, only the size of a palm, with straight edges, and the texture is not like paper, but more like metal. Wen Jianyan hesitated for 2 seconds, stepped forward, and carefully picked up the piece of paper. Identify card name, Cheng Wei age, 16 occupation, first-year student of Decay Middle School related plot, not yet unlocked. Wen Jianyan turned the card over to the back. There is also a line on the back, the initial survival time is being allocated. Wen Jianyan? He turned the card over and over several times, but never saw any other information. That's it? Wen Jianyan frowned and raised her head in doubt. The moment he raised his head, his heart skipped a beat. The door of the cupboard on the opposite bed seemed to have slipped a little more indistinctly than before, and the mirror hanging on it happened to be facing him directly. Wen Jianyan could clearly see the reflection of his own face. As well as under the bed where he was lying just now, there was a smiling, pale face. The pure black eyes stared straight at him, and the corners of the lips curved up like a mask gradually widened at that moment, when Jianyan felt a layer of cold sweat on his back. My heart was pounding, as if it was about to pop out of my throat. However, in the next second, that blurred face disappeared in the darkness, just like his illusion, and disappeared without a trace in an instant. The screen, which had been quiet all this time, finally made some noise. A few barrages drifted past sporadically. It didn't even call. The anchor's psychological quality is pretty good. I was taken aback. Wen Jianyan. No, I just had a calm face. In fact, my legs were already shaking. He slowly took a deep breath, then lowered his head and glanced at the card in his hand again. I don't know when the words on the back of the card have changed. Survival time allocation completed below is a 20-minute countdown in blood red. The number of people watching the live broadcast unknowingly reached double digits. No, right? Am I reading that right? The survival time for new anchors is 20 minutes. I laughed. What kind of luck is this? Ha 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 ha. Is it the only one among this batch of newcomers? It's too miserable if it's less than an hour. Ha 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 ha. Is this the real beginning of hell? I haven't seen a host being haunted by a ghost as soon as he wakes up. I've learned a lot. Wen Jianyan stared at the words of 20 minutes in astonishment, and fell into a brief silence. Really, old bad luck. Chapter 2. Hello Novice Anchor, congratulations on starting your first live broadcast. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. The voice was mechanical and calm, which seemed particularly abrupt in the empty dormitory. Now it's up to me to tell you the rules. This dungeon is an ordinary time-limited dungeon with a duration of 10 hours. Now the time in the copy is 7 p.m., that is, you need to survive until 5 a.m. tomorrow to pass the level, Wen Jianyan. He looked down at his ID card and fell into a moment of silence. Good guy. 10 hours and 20 minutes, the gap. Is it a bit too big? The card in your hand is an identity card, and the content of the identity card will be unlocked as the story progresses. The basic survival time has been issued for you, and more time can be redeemed through points. Just listen to the voice continue to broadcast in a tone without emotional ups and downs. Anchor points acquisition rules. 1. Real-time settlement is made according to the number of viewers in the live broadcast room. The next points settlement point is 2 hours later. 2. Complete the live broadcast task. 3. Viewers give rewards. More ways to earn points will be unlocked as you explore. After explaining the rules, the voice suddenly became passionate. The audience is God, and heat is everything. Please fight for your live broadcast room. Fight you big head ghost. The dormitory returned to silence. Wen Jianyan took a deep breath and collected himself. Although the voice relieved a little tension, he could still clearly hear his rapid and irregular heartbeat. Although the breathing rate remained stable habitually, his lungs still screamed for more oxygen. He subconsciously clenched his fingers. The sharp, hard edges of the ID card provide a distinct sting. Wen Jianyan was able to clearly realize that his life was hanging by a thread, so he was lightly announced the remaining time limit. 20 minutes. And he is a very greedy person. Especially in the matter of living. According to the rules, Wen Jianyan must gain enough points within 20 minutes to maintain his life. This method of settlement based on the number of people in the live broadcast room is unreliable. After all, he will never survive the first settlement point. That leaves you with the remaining 2 options. Obviously, the audience in the live broadcast room is also clear about this. The Danmaku visibly came alive. Oh, the anchor wants to reward you, right? Just show a little sincerity if you want it. Kowtow to the audience first, maybe I'm in a good mood and give you tens or hundreds of points. By the way, speaking of it, this novice anchor looks very good. As lines of words drifted by, unconcealable malice and joy emerged from them, as if watching a commodity that was up for grabs, excitedly speculating on how to chew him from the bones and swallow. They have seen too many little anchors who are on the verge of life and death. The anchors watched helplessly as the time limit for survival was approaching, like the noose around their necks tightened little by little, their eyes constricted and trembled, and their faces were distorted under the intense despair and fear. In this case, as long as there is a chance of survival, they will seize it regardless. No matter how terrible and excessive demands the audience makes, they will satisfy them without a limit. Kneeling, kowtowing, self-mutilation, crying, begging for mercy. Tiny, ugly, and pitiful. Wen Jianyan drooped his eyelashes, and a small crow-blue shadow fell on his fair face, adding a bit of fragility to his upright appearance. There was no superfluous expression on his face, his lips were slightly pursed, and after a few quick glances up and down on the live broadcast interface precisely tapped the hide button above. The barrage in the live broadcast room stagnated for a moment. In the dead silence, a barrage slowly floated by. Wait, am I reading that right? Is the anchor hiding his barrage interface? In fact, most anchors will hide the barrage interface during the dungeon clearance process. However, if the anchor is in trouble, or if the time is about to run out, they will often open the barrage. After all, although the audience in the live broadcast room cannot spoil the plot that has not yet happened in the barrage, they can offer reward points to initiate tasks and point out the direction for their favorite anchors. Even if it's just a gift on a whim, it's a timely gift for the anchor. Audience is God, heat is everything. This kind of rookie anchor who was about to die in 10 minutes, actually turned off the barrage interface under such circumstances? Is there something wrong with your brain? Or did the anchor actually think that under such circumstances, nobility and pride would still be valuable? Really laughed out loud. Although the anchor couldn't see it, the number of people in the live broadcast room had once again increased slightly. Now, there are more than 80 viewers in the live broadcast room, all of them gloating and waiting for a good show. After hiding the live broadcast interface, Wen Jianyan took a deep breath slowly. Moist air mixed with dust and musty smell rushed into the nostrils. To be honest, after watching those remarks in the live broadcast room, Wen Jianyan actually, I don't feel anything. After all, the way he makes his living is a fraud at best, or a professional liar targeting high-end clients at worst. No dignity, pride, morality, or integrity are all worth mentioning to him. As long as it is to survive, there is nothing he is unwilling to do. However, in the rules just now, Wen Jianyan accurately and clearly captured a key word. Time. The way to clear the customs is the survival time, the points are also used to exchange the survival time, and the initial allocation is also the survival time. Time, time, time. It can be said that time is the only and absolute measure in this dungeon. At the same time, it is also what he needs most urgently. To spend these precious 20 minutes just to wag their tails and beg for the possibility of a handout from the few dozen viewers. It was the worst deal he could think of. What's more, Wen Jianyan couldn't be more familiar with what kind of reaction human nature will arouse in this situation. He knows it, and so does the audience. These old gourmets are probably already tired of watching this kind of drama, and it is impossible to spend a lot of money just because of it. After all, according to the remarks just now, they don't seem to be such a kind existence. And the things that come to your door for nothing are of the least value. As a fraudster, Wen Jianyan is well versed in his reasoning. Well, now there is one last option left. Wen Jianyan's eyes moved down and landed on the taskbar in front of him. For the time being, only one of the live broadcast missions has been refreshed. Please novice hosts to explore the dungeon and unlock the identity card completion. 0% Wen Jianyan looked around the room she was in. Generally speaking, if you want to know your current status, searching for a dormitory is the easiest and most direct way. But when Jianyan looked down at his ID card, the countdown on it was only 17 minutes, and it was still decreasing rapidly by the minute. He has so little time. That being the case, it can only be a dangerous move. Succeed or benevolent. How to catch big fish with zero risk. When Jianyan gritted her teeth, put the ID card in her pocket, and strode out. The hallway was empty. The old-fashioned ceiling lamp hangs crookedly on the ceiling, and the dim and pale light flickers slightly, dividing the corridor into several semi-bright areas. Quiet makes people flustered. Under one of the lamps, a half-map with rust mottled on the wall can be vaguely seen. When Jianyan walked forward quickly and stood still in front of the map. There are dark and greasy handprints printed on it, and most of the patterns have peeled off, but some vague handwriting can still be barely discerned. He glanced up and down extremely quickly, then turned his head and trotted away in a certain direction. In the barrage area of the blocked live broadcast room. What is the anchor doing? I don't ask for a reward, and I don't look into the dormitory. I'm afraid I was scared out of my mind. Whatever, there are still 15 minutes left, hurry up, I can't wait. Although it was only a few seconds, when Jianyan had already firmly remembered the map in his heart. He ran down the hallway from memory. The tightly closed bedroom doors passed by his side one by one, and the windows were all pitch black, like empty eye sockets. A pale, smiling face slowly emerged from a window. The eyeballs rolled and landed on the young man who was running past, and the upward arc of the corner of the mouth was pulled even wider. When Jianyan stopped her pace abruptly, almost staggered and tripped herself because of her rapid movements. His heart was beating wildly, and he turned his head towards the window he had just passed in shock. There was nothing in the windows but flickering lights. Through the light layer of grey, Wen Jianyan could vaguely see the outline of his face. I don't know if it's an illusion. This time, the face was much closer than last time. It was as if he was approaching him little by little. Wen Jianyan felt goosebumps crawling up his arms. Ha 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 ha, it seems that the time of death is getting closer. However, what's the matter with this anchor? Seeing this situation, his face didn't even change, and he just continued to run forward. The anchors who were entangled in this dungeon before saw the ghost getting so close, and none of them didn't scream. Are you really not scared at all? Impossible. Wen Jianyan rushed downstairs as fast as she could. Although the first floor is a hall, it still looks crooked and cramped. The walls and floor are all greasy, shrouded in a dark shadow. Through the grey windows, one can vaguely see the boundless darkness outside. The door was closed, but not locked. The youth's pace did not slow down. What? I thought it would be some potential new anchor, and I secretly looked forward to it. Is the first reaction is to run? It's really boring. There is no suspense here, let's go. The number of people online in the live broadcast room dropped rapidly from over 80. Before rushing to the door, Wen Jianyan suddenly stopped her pace and turned around suddenly stand at the door of the duty room. Unlike the gate, the duty room is locked. The young man squatted down, touched the cuff with his slender fingers, and found an iron wire from nowhere. He bent the wire with familiar movements, and gently stirred it in the keyhole. Click! The latch made a crisp sound. In just a few seconds, the door of the duty room slid inward. Call! When Jianyan stood up, breathed a sigh of relief, and between the fingers that hung down, the wire magic disappeared. The number of people who were still declining in the live broadcast room suddenly stagnated and fell into a brief silence. When Jianyan pushed open the door of the duty room and stepped in. According to the map just now, this is an old-fashioned dormitory building with only 3 floors. The first floor is the lobby and water room, the second and third floors are dormitories, and the markings on the 4th floor have been blurred, covered by reddish-brown rust. Can't see what's written on it. However, the number of dormitories on each floor is so limited, the scale of this school must not be very large. Wen Jianyan understood this kind of old-fashioned school with limited funds. That is, they must have limited places to store important items. If there is a place where he can collect the most information in the shortest time, this is his best chance. Like the style of the entire dormitory building, the duty room is also very shabby. A narrow bed is leaning against the wall, which can be used for the teacher on duty to rest. A few books are piled up messily on the bookshelf, the dormitory timetable is hung on the wall, a desk is close to the window, and the outer window is usually used for talk to the students, but it's also locked now. Wen Jianyan didn't delay for a second, and immediately started searching with a kind of dexterity that ordinary people can't match. Locked drawers and cabinets were opened one by one, and quickly restored one by one. Roster of past students. Teacher duty schedule. The sound of information has been obtained came continuously from the ear. In the barrage, the audience suddenly realized, oh, this is preparing to brush up the exploration speed. Many anchors only realized that they can earn points by using the exploration degree after going through several books. He actually realized it without prompting. He has a future. Hey! So, maybe he really exchanged enough time this time. It's better not to draw conclusions so early, and you don't even look at the few minutes left. The rest of the barrage fell silent. Time is always cruel, especially when there are only 20 minutes left in the game. Although Wen Jianyan's movements were really quick, he still couldn't stop a minute and a second from slipping through his fingers. The remaining survival time of the anchor is marked on the top of the live broadcast room. Unknowingly, that number is less than 6 minutes left. In the dungeon, the remaining 5 minutes of survival time is a decisive hurdle. If the anchor's survival time is less than 5 minutes, he will become the target of the entire dungeon, and will attract the attention of all non-human beings in the dungeon without distinction whether it is a monster or an NPC. It's no less than holding a small flag in your hand, waving it wildly and shouting, "Here I am! Come and catch me!" Once the anchor falls into such a situation, the danger will only increase rapidly like a snowball, and most people may not even last 5 minutes. The moment it reached 5 o'clock, the numbers were dyed a dazzling bright red. Wen Jianyan stood in front of the table and paused slightly when flipping through the documents. He could clearly feel that the temperature around him had dropped without warning, and the already cold and damp room had become bitingly cold at this moment. The chill was so intense that it was almost terrifying, like a steel knife invading into the skin, penetrating into the skin, into the bone seam. A strong feeling of being watched came from behind. When Jianyan slowly turned her head almost uncontrollably in the vanity mirror on the table, he saw his blurred figure in the dark. A pale hand silently and slowly stretched out from the half-open cabinet behind it, and pressed it against the wall. Over his shoulder, Wen Jianyan saw a face emerging from the shadows. It was a smiling face. The pale background is like molten wax, and the simple facial features are combined on the smooth surface, like a weird smiling mask, which is silently grinning at Wen Jianyan at this moment. The pitch-black hair was like a sticky snake, and water droplets fell from the ends of the black hair. Tick, tick. It leaned out of the closet little by little, and walked slowly towards the young man. 1 step, 2 steps. As the distance draws closer, the details on the smiling mask gradually become richer. More and more like Wen Jianyan herself. At this moment, the sound of heavy and procrastinating footsteps sounded from outside the half-closed door of the duty room. The sound stopped step by step, which seemed particularly abrupt in the dead silent room, bringing an extremely ominous atmosphere. Every step seemed to be stepped on the human heart in general. Boom, boom, boom. A burst of intermittent humming came from far and near. The melody was weird and cheerful, and it gradually became clearer with the sound of footsteps, and it looked extraordinarily weird in the dead, empty, dark environment. Upon hearing this iconic voice, the barrage that is familiar with the plot immediately became excited. It's the old hag. It's the old hag. This newcomer's luck is amazing. He actually encountered the most difficult monster and the most difficult NPC at once. I haven't seen any anchor who has such treatment. The footsteps stopped at the door of the duty room. In the next second, the humming stopped. An overwhelming dead silence suddenly fell over. As if waking up from a dream, Wen Jianyan suddenly lowered her body and crawled towards the half-open cabinet under the table. The barrage that was still deserted just now finally became full of enthusiasm. Laughing to death, the newcomer is really naive. If it's normal, you can hide in a cabinet and hide under the bed. Although you can't hide from ghosts, the probability of avoiding NPCs is still very high, but now he is 100% attractive to NPCs, and he will definitely be discovered. Oh, it's a pity, if it wasn't for such a limitless start, the anchor's development potential is quite great. Don't complain, at least it's worth seeing now. Boom! The door of the duty room was suddenly pushed open from the outside. A tall, strong, and fat woman appeared outside the door. The extremely thick lenses couldn't hide the viciousness and gloominess in those eyes, the thick grey lips were tightly pressed, and white foam oozes from the corners of the drooping mouth. The slender flesh trembled slightly, and a strong sense of coldness filled her domineering face. Who's there? Boom! After a soft sound as if hitting his head, the young man stood up holding the back of his head with grinning teeth. The glasses on his face were a little crooked, and a little dust was rubbed on the side of his face. Ah! As if seeing a savior, the young man's eyes lit up slightly. Teacher Yang, you are here. The flesh on Teacher Yang's face trembled, and she froze for a moment. Obviously she hadn't thought of this direction of development. The dean gave me the key and asked me to get the roster of boarding students who just entered this class. Wen Jianyan scratched his cheeks, and gave the other party a shy smile. It seems that there is a student who didn't come to report, and the roster needs to be revised. Director Shen is in a hurry, so I came in without permission. Excuse me. Looking at the newcomer anchor who was talking nonsense without changing his expression on the screen, the barrage area was dead silent. The young man was wearing the broken glasses that he just took out from the bottom of the cabinet. Although the legs of the glasses were a little crooked, they didn't look abrupt at all when combined with his actions just now. The previous alertness and indifference had long since disappeared. He pursed his lips in embarrassment, his handsome face was covered with a little dust, his glasses gave him a fledgling bookish look, making him look straightforward and youthful. A pair of light brown eyes shone behind the lenses, with unquestionable sincerity and apology. Teacher Yang squinted his eyes, his vicious little eyes fixed on the young man in front of him through the thick lenses. Only then did Wen Jianyan suddenly realize, oh, sorry, I haven't introduced myself yet. He hurriedly took a step forward and stretched out his hand towards the other party. He seemed to realize something suddenly when he stretched halfway, and hurriedly rubbed his dusty palm on his pants with a shy expression. I'm a new trainee teacher here, just call me Xiao Wen. He reaches out again. Teacher Yang lowered his head, glanced at the palm extended by the other party, and didn't know whether he believed it or not. The young man blinked blankly and asked with concern, what's the matter? Are you unwell? Do you want to go to the infirmary? After finishing speaking just now, he seemed to realize something suddenly, and frowned in embarrassment, but teacher Wang Ping should not be here today. Finally, the old witch let out a heavy cold snort from her nose. She stepped forward with agility that belied her size, and pulled out a scrunched and crumpled booklet from a shadow box deep in the cabinet. The sound of clattering and flipping sounded in the narrow duty room. The old hag licked her greasy fingers, opened the booklet, and asked, tell me, which student didn't come to report? The moment the voice fell, the bullet screen boiled. I'm stupid. She believed it. She believed it. She believed it. Good guy can still play like this. I am astonished. How did the anchor know so much information? Didn't he just turn over the staff list, and the duty list and so on? Didn't he just come in at the front? Although, who can make up such smooth nonsense in such a short period of time, absolutely, my god. Wen Jianyan had no idea of the audience's reaction. He lowered his head and leaned over, and tapped one of the pages with his slender fingers with well-defined knuckles, and his fingertips landed on one of the names. Cheng Wei, that was the name on the ID card he drew. The young man smiled, this. The old hag took out a pen from her breast pocket, and wrote 3 words behind Cheng Wei's name, not reported. The barrage that was still in full swing just now fell silent for a few seconds. Grass, Master of Lies. 3rd chapter. After revising the list, the old hag closed the crumpled little book and threw it to Wen Jianyan. Okay, send it, but you have to make a copy for me to keep. The young man hurriedly caught the roster, helped up his crooked glasses legs, and replied embarrassingly, Ma, sorry for your trouble. Teacher in turn, hey. The old hag squinted her eyes, her grey eyeballs reflected a gloomy light behind the greasy lenses, and ordered arrogantly, it's almost time to count the number of people. It's just right. Come back after you send the roster. I'm short of manpower here. Damn it, every time a bunch of comes to me, a bunch of shameless things. The woman spat, cursed dirtily, turned and walked outside, her tall and bloated figure disappeared outside the door. Bang! The door of the duty room was slammed rudely. Through the door, Wen Jianyan heard the strange singing sound again, accompanied by the woman's heavy footsteps. The humming gradually faded away, and was finally swallowed by the dark shadow. It was obviously only a few tens of seconds, but it was as long as a century. Finally, there was only a dead silence in my ears. Almost immediately, the green and shy smile on the young man's face disappeared quickly like thin snow under the strong sunlight, but there was an expressionless silence underneath, without any emotion. The barrage was also silent for a few seconds. The anchor's expression always feels like he's planning something. Speaking of which, he felt quite familiar with the process from the very beginning. Is it some kind of boss trumpet? After all, the anchor can exchange points for a cover. And if I remember correctly, this anchor got the initial survival time of difficulty in the first level. How can ordinary people be so unlucky? It must be a limitation imposed by the system. Yes, I agree, it's very likely that it's a trumpet. However, I follow most of this level anchors and grand guilds, but this live broadcast style feels a bit out of place, doesn't it? At this moment, the anchor who was motionless just now stood up suddenly. The audience watching the live broadcast seemed to be taken aback. They held their breath subconsciously, staring at the young man on the screen, half surprised and half excitedly looking forward to his next move. Vomit. Wen Jianyan rushed to the desk, leaned over the trash can and started to retch. The slender fingers were firmly pressed against the edge of the desk, and the knuckles turned pale due to the force. Coupled with the retching sound that resounded through the room, it didn't look like a fake. The barrage fell into a dead silence. After a few seconds, rows of appeared slowly. WTF? The anchor showed such an inscrutable expression just now, and finally let me watch this. So the anchor is really a newcomer, otherwise how could he have such a big reaction? Maybe it's acting? I'm not sure. Half a minute later, Wen Jianyan stood up while leaning on the table with a pale face. I don't know if it's because he hasn't eaten for a long time, and he didn't spit out anything this time. He wiped the corners of his mouth with a face of exhaustion, the corners of his eyes were wet and red, and his long eyelashes were covered with a layer of physiological mist. Oh shit! Just now it was really scary. The clothes on Wen Jianyan's back were tightly stuck to his skin with sweat, and his palms were also wet with sweat. The cold wind blew, making him shiver uncontrollably. The scary smiling face just now is in the back of my head. Back of the head. So close. So close. I vomited in your mother's fright. Wen Jianyan's expression twisted slightly. Fortunately, the NPC who came in behind looked at least human-like, otherwise he suspected that he would die suddenly on the spot. And, more importantly, although Wen Jianyan doesn't know how much time he has left to live, but I clearly know that it is estimated that it is very extreme now. I am afraid that it will be over in a few seconds. The 2 billion he just got has not had time to spend it yet. He hasn't had time to enjoy the good life. He was not imprisoned by a criminal group, but died for no apparent reason because he was pulled into a terrorist live broadcast software. Don't do this kind of thing. Wen Jianyan is very desperate now. When he was in a panic, suddenly, there was a ding in his ear, and then the mechanical sound of the system sounded. Congratulations to the host for unlocking the new way to earn points. Story offset, 31% bonus points, 10,000. As the offset increases, the reward points will also increase significantly. Note, the degree of plot modification increases, and the dungeon will undergo uncontrollable changes. Please make persistent efforts to unlock the new plot of the dungeon. Live mission rewards are being calculated for you. Dungeon exploration degree, 20% bonus points, 2,000. Oops, the system has detected that the live broadcaster's remaining time will be less than 1 minute, and your live broadcast room will be closed soon. For the loyal fans who are waiting to be fed in your live broadcast room, would you exchange all the points in your account for the survival time? Just waiting for your words. Wen Jianyan almost cried with joy. Cash. Ding. Your points have been redeemed, please open your ID card to check. Wen Jianyan took a deep breath to calm down. Then, he took out the identity card from his pocket, only to see that the writing on it had changed since then. Identify card name, Cheng Wei, changed, Xiao Wen, age, 16, changed. Occupation, first-year student of DKI Middle School, changed, first-year trainee teacher of DKI High School, related plot, not yet unlocked, changed. All the words behind changed appear in a dull light grey color, faintly visible, almost hard to see in the dim light, as if they will disappear on the card in the next second. Wen Jianyan looked at it thoughtfully for a few seconds, then turned the card over to the back. Above is a blood-red countdown. The survival time has increased from a shocking single digit to 120 minutes. Although it was only 2 hours, he could at least live to the first point's settlement point. Wen Jianyan took a long breath of relief. He stared at the remaining survival time displayed on the card, lost in thought. It seems that points and survival time are exchanged at a ratio of 100 to 1. The rewards for exploring the dungeon are really too small. Even if it is 100%, there are only 10,000 points. Of course, more live broadcast tasks may be updated in the future, but whether he can live to that time is still uncertain. Wen Jianyan touched his chin. And the plot offset. Although the points given are really a lot, but he did not forget the system's reminder just now, the follow-up risk of this method is too great. Then, there is only one way to obtain points in the end. Wen Jianyan lowered his head to look for it, then tapped lightly in the void to re-release the live broadcast interface. The bullet screen suddenly came alive. Oh! The anchor has opened the barrage. At this time, I remembered to open the barrage. Why? Finally found that the points are not enough to survive. Wen Jianyan glanced over the excited or malicious, eccentric, or gloating bullet screens, and his eyes fell lightly on the upper right corner of the screen. Online audience, 364. Although the single digits fluctuate non-stop, the changes are generally not large. Hello everyone. The young man lowered his head slightly, and the half-blind light fell on his pale complexion, making his outline more profound and his face clear and handsome. He smiled. I don't know if it's because of his profession, but Wen Jianyan's lips are very beautiful. The lower lip is soft and plump, but the corners of the lips are narrow and sharp. When it is bent upwards, it can be easily manipulated to show various emotions, whether to impose deterrence or express friendship, they can come at their fingertips without any obstacles. The situation was too urgent before, so I didn't have time to say hello to everyone. I'm sorry. Wen Jianyan's eyelashes drooped slightly, and there was no haze in a pair of light amber eyes, which looked clear and sincere. Although his voice was slightly hoarse due to the retching just now, the apology in his voice was not mixed with water. The barrage fell silent for a moment. Indeed, the situation just now was so urgent that the anchor had no choice but to block the barrage. He didn't mean it either. Looking at the sincere and handsome face of the anchor, some viewers couldn't help but began to reflect on themselves, whether they were too harsh on this novice anchor before. As a result, more friendly bullet screens appeared. It's okay, it's understandable. It's amazing that a rookie anchor can play like this for the first time. Some people even threw some small gifts into the live broadcast room as comfort. Watching the increase of points displayed on his background balance, Wen Jianyan rolled his eyes indiscriminately. Next, he randomly picked a few questions from the barrage and answered them. Do you feel it? It's hard to describe. Of course I'm a little scared, but it's because you are here. Of course I hope to get out alive. Ha 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 ha, I'm single. Finally, Wen Jianyan's gaze fell on one of the bullet screens, as if he subconsciously read out the contents. Is this really the first time the host is playing? It's really not someone's trumpet, he snapped back. The young man smiled at the screen, and said with a calm attitude as if no one else was there, sorry, I stopped for too long, it's time to continue. After finishing speaking, before the barrage could react, Wen Jianyan quickly blocked the live broadcast room again. Wait. I seem to have noticed something. Who is going to see who the anchors above the B level of the major guilds are not broadcasting today? The retching just now is definitely acting. Absolutely. The barrage was frantically posted, countless speculations emerged, and the number of people watching the live broadcast also soared. In the next few minutes, it rose from more than 300 to nearly 800, and it is still increasing. Although Wen Jianyan blocked the barrage, he did not turn off the light screen. Listening to the jingling sound effects of live broadcast gifts, he squinted his eyes, and a fleeting smile flashed across his lips. People. They are all voyeuristic. However, both the number of online users and the reward points are still too small, so they should be raised first, and then slaughtered after they are fattened up. Suddenly, Wen Jianyan's gaze fell on a corner of the light screen, and he couldn't help but pause slightly. There crouched a miniature version of the flower pot icon. It was the useless apple seedling sent by the system. However, he didn't know if it was an illusion, but he always felt, the soil layer on the flower pot seemed to bulge a little. Wen Jianyan stared at it for a while, then frowned. The icon is too small, maybe it's misreading. He shook his head and turned off the light screen completely. Wen Jianyan stood up. Although her legs were still a little weak, they were much better than before. Before turning to leave, he couldn't help but look in the direction of the mirror. Although the matter has passed, he still has lingering fears when he thinks of what happened just now. In the half-broken mirror, the bluish-white smiling grimace just now had disappeared, leaving only the wardrobe half open. Wardrobe? Wen Jianyan showed a thoughtful expression. Speaking of which, the roster of this year's students was also dug out from here, so could there be any important clues here? The heart is not as good as the action. Wen Jianyan stepped forward and bent over to search for something in the messy closet. Because his life was at stake just now, and he didn't have too much purpose, he only did some rough searching, and now he finally had the opportunity to search the entire wardrobe in detail. Click! There was a slight crisp sound. A small hidden drawer pops open from the bottom of the wardrobe. Really? Wen Jianyan pursed her lips, not letting her excitement show, and lowered her head to inspect the odds and ends in the drawer. The drawer was full of dust, piled up with useless items, yellowed old photos, some crumpled change, a red comb with half-broken teeth, scraps of paper, rags, and some small pieces of glass. Stuff, Nothing special. Except. Wen Jianyan's eyes turned away, and his eyes stopped for a while on a corner of the drawer. There lay a small bag wrapped in a red cloth. Against the grey background, the blood-red little cloth bag looked too bright, almost to the point of dazzling, like a wound bubbling with blood. He paused, and carefully reached out to pick up the small cloth bag. The cloth bag was not big, only the size of a thumbnail, and the opening was tightly wrapped with a thin black thread, giving off a strange and ominous feeling inexplicably. Wen Jianyan untied the cloth bag. The blood-red cloth spread out silently, revealing a short section of dark light, hair tied with red string, and a molar. The pale teeth are very glaring against the background of the red cloth, which looks very strange. Wen Jianyan felt that the air around him seemed to drop a few degrees in an instant. At this moment, a crisp ding-dong sound came from my ear. Congratulations to the anchor for obtaining the hidden props, difficult, in the dungeon. Collection Degree 1/3. Wen Jianyan asked in his mind, is there any reward for finding the hidden item? For example, points that can be exchanged for survival time. He waited with bated breath. The calm female voice of the system replied, more rewards are waiting to be unlocked. Wen Jianyan. Fine. It seems that there are no points. Forget it, it's better than nothing. He sighed, rewrapped the red cloth and put it in his pocket, and reset the drawer. In a place where the anchor can't see, the barrage has already chatted enthusiastically, in this novice dungeon, if I'm not wrong, among the 4 hidden items, there is one easy, one difficult and one epic. Fuck, the other anchors broke into the duty room with all their might, and the props that can only be obtained with a waste of old nose. Is it that easy to get it? Good guy. The newcomer's first hidden item is the difficulty level. This anchor is not ordinary. The one in front just came in, right? This anchor can tell at a glance that he is not a newcomer, but he just doesn't know which big guy's alias it is. Wen Jianyan left the duty room and walked towards the gate of the dormitory. He took a deep breath, then carefully pushed the door open with his fingertips, and peeked out. The sky was dark, and heavy shadows enveloped the campus in front of us. As he expected, the school occupies a small area, and the teaching building not far away is only 4 stories high. From this angle, you can still vaguely see a crooked small playground not far away, and a small artificial playground. Lake. The lights in the teaching building were all dark. Just as Wen Jianyan was about to look away, he suddenly discovered in front of a window on the 4th floor, a shadow stood silently. In the darkness, thicker shadows outlined the outline of a human figure. The shadow stood fixedly in front of the window, standing there silently, motionless. For some reason, Wen Jianyan just felt that it was watching him. He suddenly felt a icy chill climb up the back of his neck, which instantly aroused goosebumps. So permeable. At this moment, the shadow raised his hand and lightly pressed it against the window. A pale and fuzzy face emerged from the darkness, slowly and tightly stuck to the window boom. The next second, there was a clear knock on the door without warning, and it almost exploded right in front of Wen Jianyan. I'm so stupid. Wen Jianyan's scalp tingled instantly, and his hair stood on end. I saw that the door in front of me was pushed open vigorously, and opened under the darkness of night. The old witch's tall and bloated figure appeared in the night. While wiping her hands on her greasy skirt, she looked at Wen Jianyan with some surprise. In turn, have you sent the list? Wen Jianyan's heart was beating wildly, but a smile was already on his face reflexively. Yes, it is. So fast. Because you need help. The young man rubbed the back of his head shyly, so I came back as fast as possible. The old witch looked Wen Jianyan up and down for a few seconds, and finally let out a cold snort from her nostrils. Pretty clever. She passed Wen Jianyan and walked forward. Follow. The door of the dormitory closed behind the old hag. Wen Jianyan subconsciously looked in the direction just now. The window on the 3rd floor of the teaching building was empty and there was nothing. He swallowed. It's not right to think so, but thank goodness it was this NPC. At least he looks like a human being. When Jianyan repeated the words human looks like human several times in his heart, finally mustered up the courage, turned around, and quickly followed the old witch's back. The old hag stood at the stairs, looking up. The narrow stairs extend into the deep shadows, and through the thin walls, you can faintly hear the noisy voices from upstairs. This freshman class really has no rules. After finishing speaking, she giggled abruptly twice. Her voice is rough, but the tone is as delicate as a girl's, and the malicious and happy light in the depths of her two small grey eyes is particularly creepy. You should take good care of it. The huge woman walked up the stairs step by step, humming a weird and pleasant tune. After a bout of hysteria and denial, all novice streamers are temporarily forced to accept the status quo. Their lives hang in the balance, with nothing to do but play by the rules. Although he has no intention of helping his competitors, in order not to let novices get in the way, the experienced anchor will still inform the rules in the dungeon. This level dungeon is not very difficult. As a novice with no audience base, the first thing the anchors should do is to unlock the hidden information on the identity card. The more you know your identity in the dungeon, the better you will be able to deal with various emergencies, and the higher your survival rate will be. Everyone was rummaging through the room in which they woke up, looking for all the personal information related to the ID card. Su Cheng held his ID card tightly, lying on the ground, panting, struggling to pick up the sundries under the bed. His survival time is only 4 hours, which is the shortest among these companions. No matter how he spoke to the live broadcast area, the barrage and the number of viewers were all deserted, and there was no sign of growth at all. So, if you don't succeed in finding something, he won't survive tonight. This feeling of being able to see the of death approaching made Su Cheng feel very panicked, and he could hardly breathe. Beads of cold sweat ran across the hot and bloodshot cheeks, and landed on the dusty ground with a clatter. The ground under your palms trembled. Boom, boom, boom. It seemed that heavy footsteps were approaching. A woman's humming followed. The melody is cheerful and simple, intermittently and faintly hovering in the gloomy corridor, gradually becoming clearer with the sound of footsteps. Su Cheng broke out in a cold sweat. He stood up awkwardly, and subconsciously looked at the senior anchor in the opposite dormitory. Obviously, the other party also heard the approaching ominous signal, and became vigilant as well. Both the footsteps and the humming ceased. Cough, cough, cough. After deliberately clearing his throat, a malicious and rude voice suddenly sounded, echoing in the dark and narrow corridor, "Assemble." The dead silence after the noise became extremely unbearable. The anchors looked at each other, standing still. Finally, under the leadership of several experienced and senior anchors, the rest of the anchors were all dubious and left their dormitory step by step. A tall and bloated woman stood at the end of the corridor, and the flickering lights above her head fell on her broad shoulders, illuminating her fleshy, crowded face. She stared at the sparse new students in front of her with her small grey eyes. Her eyes were vicious and sticky, like poisonous snakes winding up her calves. Too slow. A malicious smile squeezed out of that face full of flesh. It's your blessing to be able to enter Decay Middle School. One by one, you are still so lax and ignorant of good and evil. If you don't follow the rules, you will be punished. Her voice gradually lowered and became more and more weird, and it was almost unbearable that the hairs stood on end, and her whole body felt cold. Some anchors couldn't help but take a step back. After seeing the NPC that appeared, the barrage in each anchor's live broadcast room became active. As expected of an old hag, she is still so intimidating. He, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know which anchor is the first to be punished this time. The old hag looked around with a gloomy gaze, and found that everyone was silent, and slowly showed a satisfied smile. However, this is the first time for you guys, and you don't know the school rules, so I won't do anything. I won't be so lucky next time, remember. She accentuated. A panicked and powerless answer sounded, echoing unevenly in the corridor, "Remember, remember. Remember it." The old hag raised her voice without warning. All the anchors were excited, shouting in unison, "Remember." "Very good." The old hag nodded in satisfaction. "From today onwards, you can call me Teacher Yang. It's time for dinner soon. After counting the number of people, I'll show you the place." Seeing the current situation, all the bullet screens in the live broadcast room of the anchors seemed a bit regretful. "Ah, it seems that this time I'm not going to have an operation as soon as I come up. Because the anchors this time are very obedient and not thorny. Well, and after all, it's a level dungeon, the difficulty is low, and it's understandable that there is no opening kill. Cut, it's boring, let's go." While chatting hotly on the barrage, the old hag made a move they had never seen before. She turned her head and shouted, "Little Wen." The barrage fell silent for a moment. I saw a tall and handsome young man walking out from the shadow behind the old witch. His hair was disheveled. Even with those crooked glasses, he still couldn't conceal the superiority of his facial features. Sentimental bookishness. His expression is shy and docile. "Hey, Teacher Yang, tell me. Is the recopied list in your place? Check the number of people." The barrage area of each anchor exploded, with rows of question marks. "Wait. I have seen the copy of Decay Middle School several times, but I have never seen this NPC. Isn't this a level copy? Why is it temporarily modified? Ha ha ha, I came from the next door and I'm glad to see you all covered up. Ha 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 ha, same, I'm from next door too." The above user comments involve the host in the same hall, and will only be open to the audience. Wait, what the hell? I can't read it anymore. Ask for directions. Live broadcast room 789326QWK, after watching you will come back and thank me. The above user comments involve the host in the same hall, and will only be open to the audience when the live broadcast hall of Decay Middle School was in chaos. The sign outside the live broadcast hall did not know when a slight change occurred. Hall difficulty rating, D. The highest unlock progress in history, 72% viewing value, E. The letter E flashed slowly, and then became D+. Chapter 4 on the live broadcast square. The shortcut entrances of each live broadcast hall are arranged from top to bottom according to the viewing value. Perhaps because there are too many newcomers, the live broadcast halls open this time are basically below Clevel and Blevel, and Alavel halls are rare, which also makes the vast majority of viewers concentrate in those few high-level halls. After all, the higher the difficulty, the stronger the appreciation. Suddenly, someone saw a familiar novice-level dungeon somewhere near the middle end. Decay Middle School? Isn't it a graded copy? Why is it ranked here? Could it be that the sorting of the system is wrong? The audience was puzzled. Seeing this, some curious viewers couldn't wait to go in, ready to see what happened with their own eyes. After all, if it wasn't for the system sorting error, then there must be some variable in this level dungeon, which suddenly increased the system's judgment on the viewing value of the entire dungeon. This kind of thing doesn't happen every day. Asterisk. The terrified anchors crowded into the narrow corridor like sardines stuffed into a can. After the old hag's voice fell, all eyes fell on the young man at the end of the corridor instantly. They looked bewildered, held their breath, and waited in fear. Under the dim light, the corridor was narrow, and the green wall skin was mottled and peeled off, revealing dark grey stains. The air was dead silent. The 789326QWK live broadcast room was full of enthusiasm, which was completely opposite to the outside world. With the influx of viewers in other live broadcast rooms, the number of online viewers displayed in the live broadcast room is increasing rapidly. Ding! The number of people online in the live broadcast room exceeded 1,000. Ding! The number of people online in the live broadcast room exceeded 2,000. Congratulations to the host for achieving the achievement, newcomer. Wow, the popularity in your live broadcast room is rising, your high-quality live broadcast has attracted more viewers, wavelet popularity is coming to your live broadcast room. Ding! The number of rewards in the live broadcast room exceeded 50. Congratulations to the host for achieving the achievement, a small gain. Wow, more and more loyal fans are convinced by your charm. Please the anchor work hard, keep working hard, let more people willingly open their wallets for you. Come from next door, I really didn't expect this trainee teacher to be an anchor, I was shocked. +1 from next door. How did the anchor get into the NPC team? I'm so curious, please make up for it. Where is the history replay for newbies? I can't find the homepage. Can someone kindly show me the way? Don't bother the ones ahead, don't waste time, anyway, this anchor is probably about to overturn, ha 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 ha. Why? What happened? Immediately afterwards, more gloating ha 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 brushed across the barrage. Although the audience who just came in are not clear, most of the other audiences have been watching from the beginning to the present. The dean didn't ask anyone to get the list at all, it was all compiled by Wen Jianyan, and the crumpled booklet is now in Wen Jianyan's pocket. As for the recopied backup list, there is absolutely no such thing. However, the burden of roll call fell on Wen Jianyan's shoulders. He either honestly said that he didn't copy it at all, or he had to take out the booklet in his pocket and read it. However, no matter how he chooses, it will be contrary to his lie at the beginning, and it will definitely arouse suspicion. And doubt is like water poured on a sandcastle, which can disintegrate lies that cannot withstand scrutiny. This is the case in reality, not to mention that it is still in the dungeon now. With the temperament of the old hag, it is absolutely impossible to let go of such an opportunity. Once caught, this anchor who is full of lies will surely die. It seems that this anchor's short and brilliant career is probably coming to an end. Although he said it was a pity, most of the audience became more excited. After all, if the car is overturned, of course the harder it is overturned, the better it looks. The entire corridor was enveloped in a suffocating silence. All eyes fell on Wen Jianyan. The tall woman with a fleshy face turned slightly sideways, and a pair of small, vicious, and dark eyes like jackals looked over from the slit on the side of the glasses. There was a shimmer in the eyes, like the sharp flash of a sharp blade a second before the guillotine fell. Dim lights flickered overhead, and the light was refracted on the edge of the somewhat crooked lenses, blocking the expression in the young man's eyes. His face looked pale and weak under the light, his lips were pursed, and then calmly and slowly, he reached into his pocket little by little. The audience in front of the screen held their breath subconsciously, watching the anchor's every move greedily. Soon, Wen Jianyan pulled his fingers out of his pocket. I saw a piece of white paper folded in four in his hand, as if torn from a notebook, wrinkled, with irregular marks on the edges, and scribbled handwriting faintly visible on the side. Wen Jianyan unfolded the paper. The rustling sound of paper rubbing against each other echoed in the dead corridor, making one's heart beat faster. Zhang Zi. The youth's voice sounded in the corridor, gentle and clear. The audience in the live broadcast room were stunned. How did you read it? What's the situation? Is the anchor trying to get by making up? After a few seconds of silence, a weak voice sounded from the end of the corridor, and responded in a low voice, "Arrive." Zhou Feng Yuan. Arrive. Wen Jianyan read one name after another, and every time he read a name, there would be a high or low response from the crowd. This is absolutely impossible to make up. What's going on? Did he really copy a copy when the audience didn't notice? When did this happen? I have no impression at all. As if to answer the doubts in the hearts of the audience, the camera in the live broadcast room moved, zoomed in, and zoomed in again. It finally landed on the piece of paper in Wen Jianyan's hand. The creases on the white paper were still crumpled, and a few lines were written in extremely scrawled handwriting: scallion, cabbage, garlic, pork, chili. Remember to buy toothpaste and washing powder. A dense floated in the live broadcast room. This is Shopping list? Wen Jianyan lowered her head, stared at the few short lines on the shopping list without changing her expression, and continued reading with great confidence. Zhao Runchange. Arrive. Yes. Arrive. After realizing what happened, the barrage exploded. The anchor memorized the list. Damn, what kind of memory is this? Do you have a photographic memory? Not necessarily. Maybe he had expected this to happen, so he secretly memorized it or something. After all, there are only a dozen or so names. Isn't the person in front talking too brainy? Isn't it more difficult? What kind of prejudgment level is this? Soon, except for Cheng Wei who did not enroll, everyone else was called. The old hag stood where she was, squinted her eyes and looked around slowly, and let out a cold snort from her nasal cavity, but it was impossible to tell whether she was satisfied or disappointed. She turned around. Let's go. Wen Jianyan let out a slow breath, refolded the paper and stuffed it into his pocket. By the way, he secretly rubbed his wet palm on his pants. So close. Fortunately, his career is too high risk, so he has developed the habit of subconsciously memorizing all the important information in front of him, firstly, to prevent his lying from being exposed, and secondly, to act on the spot at a critical moment. After all, the point of a lie is in the details. Even an insignificant detail, if neglected, could cost a life. He took a deep breath, turned his head to look at the anchors behind him, and raised his chin. Didn't you hear Teacher Yang's words? Follow up. Just now, the bullet screens who were still lamenting the anchor's extraordinary memory and prediction ability were silent, and the wind direction suddenly changed. Grass, a fox pretends to be a tiger. Grass, the villain will succeed. Shameless. Shameless. The rest of the anchors looked at each other in blank dismay, stepped forward in fear, and followed behind Wen Jianyan. The old witch went straight downstairs and walked towards the outside of the dormitory building. It was dark. The small campus is immersed in the burning dusk, like a small cardboard box that is about to be crushed. A few tens of meters away from the dormitory building was a low building with only one floor. The door was open, exposing the watery grey-black concrete floor. Like a restaurant. There are several rows of grey-yellow long tables lined up inside. The paint on the tabletops is peeling off, and it looks greasy under the dim light, as if it has not been carefully cleaned for many years. At the end of the dining room are two school desks pushed together. Huge food bowls made of white iron were placed side by side on top, steaming outwards. The old hag stopped at the entrance of the cafeteria, turned her head to look at the boarders behind her, and said coldly, "Arrive." The woman looked around, her tall figure brought a terrible sense of oppression. The anchors gathered together silently, waiting for each other to speak. I saw the old hag raised her stubby finger and pointed at the cabinet next to her. "Your lunch boxes are all there. Remember to put them back after you wash them after eating. If you lose them, you will have to pay for it." The old hag pointed to the clock hanging on the wall of the cafeteria again. "After eating and washing the dishes, go back to the dormitory by yourself. The door of the dormitory building is 9:30 at night." She grinned, and the maliciousness in her expression could hardly be concealed. "If you don't come back on time, I won't let you in." "Okay, let's move freely." After finishing speaking, the old witch turned around and walked towards the dormitory building while humming. Because they were very close, when Jianyan heard the last few words she sang this time, "To agree with one's mind." She hummed that unspeakable ditty, and her tall and fat body quickly disappeared into the sinking night. Wen Jianyan was stunned for a moment, and quickly came back to his senses. He stepped forward, clapped his palms, and said loudly, "Did everyone hear what Teacher Yang said? The freshmen who have received their lunch boxes come here to gather and line up in 2 rows to get lunch." As a skilled liar, he has integrated into the role of trainee teacher without psychological barriers. In just a few words, Wen Jianyan not only transferred the power of the old witch to himself, but also became the one who controlled the overall situation very naturally. Streamers instinctively follow the dictates of authority. After a short period of confusion, everyone packed their lunch boxes and lined up in 2 rows at the entrance of the cafeteria. Wen Jianyan nodded without changing his face, and said with satisfaction, "Come in." So, the counterfeit took 2 rows of boarding students into the cafeteria with peace of mind, and commanded them to line up for dinner in a pretentious manner. The cook is an old crooked old woman, her eyes are cloudy, her fingers are wrinkled like bark, and she is holding the rice spoon tremblingly, and the white iron rice spoon makes a harsh sound when it scratches the bottom of the basin. Dinner was something like some type of porridge. There is a layer of oil flakes floating on the turbid yellow-white, and in the viscous semi-liquid white fat meat, sparse rice grains and soft noodles are mixed at the bottom of the spoon, exuding a smell that makes people lose their appetite. She mechanically served the students spoonfuls of rice. The moment each anchor saw the food in his bowl, an indescribable complex expression appeared on his face. They held the rice bowls with disheveled faces, and chose a seat on the long table to sit down. When all the students had finished eating, the old woman bent down tremblingly, ready to pick up the big iron basin with only a foundation left in front of her. Wen Jianyan strode forward and took the basin from the opponent's hand without any explanation. "I'll come, you just need to rest." His posture was gentle and humble, and he looked at the old woman in front of him with great concern. Whether it was giving orders at the door, or organizing everyone to line up to enter the cafeteria, Wen Jianyan was already preparing for the conversation at this time. "Which direction are you going?" he asked. The old woman raised a bark-like finger and pointed to the back of the cafeteria. Wen Jianyan slowed down and walked side by side in that direction. The old woman raised her cloudy eyes, turned to look at the young man beside her, and asked in an old voice, "Young man, you are new to me, what's your name?" Wen Jianyan pursed her lips shyly, "I just came here today, you can just call me Xiao Zhao. I am Director Shen's distant nephew. I just graduated a while ago, so I want to come to my uncle to help find a job this time." Oh. Uncle asked me to find teacher Yang and ask her to show me around the school, but... Wen Jianyan shook her head, and quickly raised a disguised smile, "Yeah, it's nothing, that is, teacher Yang seems to be busy, so, let me stay and help organize discipline," and then left in a hurry. He hesitated for a moment, pursed his lips, and asked uneasily, Did I do something wrong?" Inside the 789326QWK live broadcast room. The smell of tea, full of tea. Just now he was an intern teacher, but now he is Director Shen's nephew. I want to see how many more identities he can make up. Simple way of being a human being. This veiled way of answering clearly made the other party understand something immediately. The old woman sighed, a trace of gloom flitted across her face. She stretched out her hand to pat Wen Jianyan's shoulder, and said kindly, "Don't take it too seriously, Teacher Yang, she's always been like this, not on purpose against you. It's okay, if you have any questions in the future, you can ask me." Really? Thank you." Wen Jianyan showed a flattered smile. A ray of smile reached deep into his eyes. Sure enough, when dealing with such elders, the combination of a favorable background and an appropriate show of weakness is the fastest way to obtain information. The two walked and chatted. Wen Jianyan kept his words calm, keeping all the information from the other party's mouth firmly in his heart. Before he knew it, Wen Jianyan had arrived in the back kitchen. Compared with the restaurant in front, the back kitchen is narrower and filthier. There is a sour and turbid smell from the mixed fermentation in the air. The blue swill bucket placed aside is half filled, and the inner edge of the outer wall is covered with thick residue and dirt. There is everywhere. Under the command of the old woman, Wen Jianyan poured the remaining soup in the bowl into the slop bucket, and then placed the empty bowl beside the chopping board. Just as he was about to turn around and say goodbye, his eyes suddenly paused slightly. Not far from the chopping board is a sink. A layer of grayish-yellow water couldn't flow down, and it accumulated in the sink. In the turbid water, several strands of black oily hair slowly floated, long, entwined around the mouth of the sewer like a living thing. Wen Jianyan subconsciously cast a glance at the top of the old woman's head. Short hair, grey and dry. At this moment, a shrill scream came from the direction of the cafeteria, piercing the night like a sharp knife. It was frightening. Wen Jianyan was taken aback. In the next second, he reacted immediately, said goodbye to the other party hastily, then turned around and walked towards the direction of the sound. However, before he could take a few steps, the trembling old voice sounded from behind, "That's right, boy." Wen Jianyan paused and turned to look. The old woman opened her cloudy eyes, her bark-like wrinkled face trembled slightly, and said in a very low voice, "Stay away from the 4th floor of the dormitory." Wen Jianyan's pupil shrank. Before he could ask anything, the old woman turned around and slowly disappeared into the depths of the cafeteria with 3 waving steps. In the cafeteria, the tables and chairs fell to the ground in a mess, and the sound of hurried footsteps and panicked screams mixed into noisy waves, and there was chaos everywhere. An anchor fell down in embarrassment beside the sink, with an overturned food bowl at his feet, and the yellow and white soup was spilled all over the floor. His long, jet-black hair was pulled out mixed with saliva, forming a sticky mass. Lie on the ground. However, he was still vomiting crazily, scratching his throat with trembling fingers, as if there was something still stuck in his throat. Vomit! The anchor arched his back convulsively and made a horrible retching sound. What happens? What's going on here? Several anchors gathered together and asked in disbelief. It's against the rules. A cool voice came from not far away. The novice anchors were startled, and turned to look in the direction of the voice. They remembered that the man who spoke was a senior anchor named Kong Shixing. There are 2 other senior anchors who seem to be on the same team as him, and the 3 of them stay together all the time. Kong Shixing stood aside with his arms folded, his expression indifferent. This kind of level dungeon is generally not too difficult, the key point is to be obedient, as long as you act under the premise of abiding by the rules, start a live broadcast, and do the main and branch routes of the system. Quests, generally speaking, can make up the necessary survival time. Of course, the premise is that you don't violate the rules. Those novice anchors felt a little cold behind. Violation, violation. Instead of gathering here and thinking wildly, you might as well ask around and find out how this unlucky guy violated the rules, so that you can avoid risks in the future. Su Cheng, who was standing aside, heard all their conversations. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling slightly, and he said, I seem to know. Hearing this, the eyes of several other people turned to him. He said just now, who knows if there is any problem with the food here, and if you eat it, there will be no accidents, so he wants to secretly pour the contents of the bowl into the sink while the NPC is not present. This statement does sound reasonable. In addition, the soup and rice here look really bad, like swill. Even if it is poured out, it is not a pity, so I got the approval of several anchors, and they came to the pool with him carrying the rice bowl. However, the moment the leading man poured out the soup and rice, a look of pain suddenly appeared on his face. The rice bowl fell to the ground with a clang, and a mouthful of untouched rice and soup spilled all over the floor. The other anchors were frightened and couldn't help but retreat one after another. No one dared to approach the pool anymore. Then, long jet-black hair began to be gushed out of the anchor's mouth. While Su Cheng was describing, he squeezed the rice bowl in his sweaty hands, and his voice became a little unstable. The few people who listened carefully were startled. They suddenly realized something, and suddenly turned their heads to look aside. On one side of the wall in the canteen, there were 8 mottled and faded characters written, "Saving is glorious, waste is shameful." Kong Shixing narrowed his eyes and said, "So that's the case, then this is one of the rules. After his words fell, several other anchors looked at the almost unmoved soup and rice in their bowls, and their expressions changed a few times. It seems, they must eat this meal. Not only have to eat, but also have to eat clean, not a single grain of rice can be left behind. Outside the door, Wen Jianyan stood with arms folded, with a thoughtful expression on his face. Rule. It seems that this is the key word. The overall game was not much different from his guess, which made Wen Jianyan heave a long sigh of relief. After all, it is much easier to have rules than ghosts who kill people indiscriminately. As long as there are rules, loopholes are bound to be found. Once a loophole is found, the rule can be exploited in reverse. Moreover, perhaps because the level of the copy is not high, the judgment of the rules here is obviously not strict, otherwise Wen Jianyan would not have taken advantage of the loophole and successfully mixed into the teacher team. At this moment, the vomiting anchor suddenly bent down, and finally let out a heart-piercing violent retch vomit. Patter. There was a crisp landing sound. Several white molars mixed with blood and saliva landed on the ground, and the small, fingernail-sized teeth rolled on the ground, grunting, until one of them rolled all the way in front of Wen Jianyan, and then slowly stopped. The pale tooth stayed at the edge of the line of sight, looking extremely strange. Wen Jianyan stared at it and felt a chill rise up his back. The small red cloth bag that was forgotten in his pocket seemed to suddenly become heavy, and it fell heavily in his trouser pocket, sticking to his thigh, making his skin burn for no reason, almost a little unbearable. Molar? Could this be related to the hidden object he found earlier? At this moment, a familiar mechanical voice suddenly sounded in Wen Jianyan's ear, ding. It is detected that the conditions are met, and the hidden branch line is opening. Wait. Wen Jianyan panicked. Before he could react, he saw strands of jet black hair spreading over without warning, wrapping tightly around his wrists and ankles, icy cold and greasy, twisted tightly like a living thing. The hidden branch is opened. The moment the voice fell, Wen Jianyan suddenly felt dark. This feeling is so familiar. The moment he entered the instance with him was simply exactly the same. Before Wen Jianyan lost consciousness, there was only one last sentence left in his mind. Garbage live broadcast room, I hate you. Chapter 5 Bang! Wen Jianyan turned his back to the sky, and fell down in an unsightly manner. The tailbone hit the hard ground, and there was a faint dull pain, which made his expression slightly twisted, and he bit a low curse between his teeth. But now is not the time to complain. Wen Jianyan swallowed her complaints, raised her head with a grin, and quickly looked around her environment. The bright incandescent lights above the head, the dirty wash basin in front of the edge, and the rows of dark blue compartments behind, both the color tone and the facilities, look much newer than the scenes in the previous copy. Obviously, this is a toilet. Ladies' toilet. Even those who don't watch movies often know that this scene is definitely a favorite place for all kinds of horror movies. Being thrown into such a place alone all of a sudden, Wen Jianyan was not a brave person at all, but at this moment, he couldn't help feeling a little more apprehensive. Hold on, hold on, hold on. He thought repeatedly in his heart. Wen Jianyan walked towards the door, reached out and pushed hard. Nothing moved. The doorknob was shaken and made a rattling sound, but the door panel seemed to be sealed with cement, and it remained motionless under Wen Jianyan's shaking. Don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. And this is a level dungeon, a level dungeon. It shouldn't be so quick to throw people into a dead end. Wen Jianyan closed her eyes forcefully, trying to calm herself down. He took his ID card out of his pocket. Identify card name, Cheng Wei, changed, Xiao Wen/Xiao Zhao, age, 16, changed. Occupation, first year student of DKI Middle School, changed, first year intern teacher of DKI High School / Dean Shen's distant nephew, related plot, not yet unlocked, changed. Wen Jianyan found that the lines of text related to the identity of Xiao Wen were much darker than before, while the text on the side of Xiao Zhao was light gray, as if it would disappear in the next second. He looked thoughtful. It seems that as the number of people who believe in it increases, this identity will gradually solidify, as if it is recognized step by step. So, as long as his identity is not exposed, maybe he can create a plot that has never been seen in this dungeon? It's almost like tampering with the script. He collected himself and withdrew his thoughts of running around. This is not something to worry about as a person whose life is in danger. Wen Jianyan turned the ID card over to the back. The number on the back of the card was frozen on 2105, motionless. Seeing the stagnant countdown, he couldn't help being slightly taken aback. This means that the survival time is not consumed inside the hidden branch. It's good not to waste time. But, it also symbolizes a dangerous tendency. Outside, although the length of survival is a limitation, it is also a kind of protection to a certain extent. According to the information disclosed by the previous senior anchor, in this simple dungeon, as long as there is no violation of the rules or death, the duration will not be deducted, and the anchor will always be given a psychological buffer zone. In this hidden branch, this rule obviously does not apply. In other words, he couldn't predict what happened next. Wen Jianyan shivered, and an ominous premonition suddenly rose in his heart. At this moment, an inorganic mechanical sound came from Wen Jianyan's ear. Ding! It has been detected that the anchor's live broadcast has reached 2 hours. Do you want to enable point settlement? This voice brought Wen Jianyan back from his trance. On. He replied. In the A-level live broadcast room 789326QWK, the average number of viewers per hour is 2,000, and 200 points can be exchanged. If the anchor is detected as a novice anchor, the points you will get for this live broadcast will be doubled, and 400 points have been settled in your account. You are still 4,600 points away from the upgrade of your live broadcast room. Please make persistent efforts and create greater glories. During your live broadcast, a total of 63 people tipped you, and you got a total of 500 tipping points. It is detected that the anchor is a novice anchor, and the system will not draw a share for this live broadcast, and 500 points have been settled in the account for you. The remaining points in your account are 900. The next point settlement time is 2400 hours. Wait. Wen Jianyan suddenly realized something. A commission? Will your system still take a commission? Yes. The inorganic voice replied politely. After the novice anchor period is over, the system's commission for rewards will gradually increase. The corners of Wen Jianyan's eyes twitched, and he said dryly, "You guys really know how to make money." He suddenly had an ominous premonition, and continued to ask, "What about the points for the number of viewers? Will you take a cut?" "Will not." However, before waiting for Wen Jianyan to heave a sigh of relief, he just listened to the mechanical voice and continued, "However, as your streamer's rating increases, the conversion ratio of points will also change flexibly. All our rules will be based on the audience's viewing experience, please rest assured." Translated, it means that the current ratio is 1 to 10, so it won't be so in the future, right? Wen Jianyan. Don't worry. The viewing experience of those audiences cost him his life. Damn capitalists! Before he could continue to question, there was the sound of approaching footsteps outside the bathroom door, and then, the low laughter and noise of two girls came through the door. Wen Jianyan was startled, and retreated reflexively into one of the compartments. The next second after he hid in, he heard a squeak, and the toilet door that had been shaken by an adult man just now was easily pushed open. Da-da-da. With the brisk footsteps, the conversation of two strange girls came from outside the door. "Speaking of which, have you heard of that one?" There was a kind of creepy excitement in the girl's lowered voice. "What? That's right, that's the legend." Wen Jianyan stood in the toilet cubicle, listening to the conversation outside, his expression became a little complicated. As a grown man, secretly hiding in the school girls' restroom and eavesdropping on. It's actually a bit perverted. The conversation between the two girls outside continued. Ah! Did you say? Right. Unknowingly, the girl's footsteps stopped in front of the door of the toilet cubicle where Wen Jianyan was. The figure swayed slightly under the crack of the door, and the voice came through the cubicle door clearly, "There is a mirror in the dormitory building 408, as long as you can find it, it can grant one of your wishes." Another girl's voice hesitated, "Do we have 408 on the 4th floor? It is said that there was one, but 408 was later sealed with cement." The girl said mysteriously, "You have to look for it at 2 o'clock in the morning to find it, and after you open the door." "Ah, stop talking." Another girl raised her voice in panic and interrupted the other party's narration, "If Teacher Yang hears about it, you must be fined and locked up." The old hag. The girl's voice became gloomy, "She not only slapped me a few days ago, but also fined me not to eat dinner. This kind of ugly, cheap and disgusting woman should die early to contribute to the world." "You, keep your voice down." "I won't." She giggled twice, "Anyway, that old hag better pray that I don't find the mirror, or I won't let her go." The faucet was turned on and off, the two girls washed their hands while talking and laughing, and the sound of footsteps gradually moved away. As the footsteps left, all the sounds in the toilet seemed to be sucked away by a sponge, leaving only a palpitating silence. Wen Jianyan let out a breath of foul air slowly, and lowered his eyes to look at the gap under the compartment. The shadow that was still shaking just now disappeared. "Have they gone?" He raised his fingertips and was about to open the door and walk out. Tick-tock. There was the sound of water dripping outside the door, and Wen Jianyan paused involuntarily. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The sound of water droplets approaching, sounded against the door. Tick-tock. A drop of scarlet viscous liquid fell from the ceiling, dripping on the back of the young man's white hand. Wen Jianyan froze on the spot, a shudder slowly creeping up his spine, some unspeakable sense of terror made him shiver all over. Immediately afterwards, he felt a bit itchy on the back of his neck. It's almost like the long hair hanging from the ceiling, shaking, gently rubbing against his sweaty skin. At this moment, a girl's laughter sounded from above Wen Jianyan's head, "Hee hee, eavesdropping, I got it." Before the sound of the word "law" landed, Wen Jianyan suddenly raised her foot and kicked viciously on the toilet door in front of her. Half of the door hinge fell off, and the whole door fell to the ground with a bang, kicking up a cloud of dust. In the next second, as if his was on fire, the figure of the young man swished out, and rushed out of the toilet door without looking back. It seemed that there was no reaction for a while, the hair hanging from the ceiling stopped for a while, and then seemed to be irritated, and rushed towards the direction where the young figure disappeared. The audience in the live broadcast room didn't react either. "I'm still waiting to raise my head to kill. Why did I just run away? I'm so mad. Look up. What are we looking at if we don't look up? Fuck, this anchor is running faster than a rabbit, I think he has an afterimage when he runs. Ha 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 ha." The anchor's desire to survive almost overflowed the screen, and the family members burst into laughter. "There's something behind, there's something." Wen Jianyan screamed crazily in his heart while running wildly. "Nonsense! What are you waiting for if you don't run? Wait for the other person to ask politely, 'May I kill you, please?' 36 strategies are the best strategy. No matter what it is, run away first." After flushing out of the toilet, there was an extremely familiar corridor in front of him, which stretched into the distance in darkness, with almost no end in sight. Apparently, he's back in the dormitory building now. It's just that the scene in front of me is much newer than before, most of the stains on the walls and floor have disappeared, and it shouldn't be the same timeline as him. At this moment, there was a rustling sound behind him, as if something was rubbing against the wall and the floor. As Wen Jianyan ran forward, she took the time to turn her head and take a look. This look made his whole scalp tingle. The pitch-black hair was like a wriggling snake, climbing and extending from the toilet door. In the depths of the dark tide, there were faintly visible pale limbs surrounded by them, rushing towards him one after another. A thin, intermittent hum came from his hair. The mechanical straight voice sounded extremely unsuitable. Congratulations to the host for triggering the scene. Chase battle scene countdown. 10 o'clock. Immediately afterwards, Wen Jianyan saw two blood bars appear above his line of sight. One is health and the other is sanity. If the life value returns to 0, the anchor dies and the live broadcast ends. If the sanity value returns to 0, the host will become part of the dungeon, and the live broadcast will end. In order to bring a better viewing experience to the audience, please ensure that the live broadcast is unblocked, and do not disconnect. Damn, you are trying to drain the last drop of blood from the working people. Wen Jianyan's expression twisted slightly, and he ran forward with all his strength. The long hair behind her followed closely like a shadow. In all fairness, Wen Jianyan's physique is not bad, and his physical fitness can even be called good. After all, having a well-proportioned body is a basic professional requirement. As a professional liar with a lifelong pursuit, Wen Jianyan can be considered to look thin when dressed, and fleshy when undressed. In short, running in the corridor for 10 minutes it's okay to not be caught up. But Wen Jianyan always felt that this chasing battle was not that simple. The girl's innocent laughter sounded from all directions, and for a while she couldn't tell where it came from. If you don't obey the rules, kid, you will be punished. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Under the dim light, the blood-red viscous liquid slowly dripped and hit the floor, and the sound of water dripping echoed in the empty corridor. With sharp eyes, Wen Jianyan saw that the small piece of ground where the blood dripped began to slowly change. The cold and hard floor became dark and soft, as if a living creature was wriggling under the ground. Wen Jianyan suddenly jumped to the side, narrowly avoiding the strands of hair attacking him from under the ground. Tick-tock. A drop of blood fell and hit his shoulder. Wen Jianyan felt the right side of his body go cold for a moment, and a creepy feeling crawled up. In the midst of fear, he seemed to vaguely see a pale little face pressed against his right shoulder, with his eyes wide open. A pair of dark eyes with no whites were looking at him with a smile. Hold! His scalp went numb, and he subconsciously stopped. However, before Wen Jianyan could take a closer look, that pale face disappeared in the next second, leaving only a small pit corroded on his right shoulder clothes. Wen Jianyan looked back, and found that the health bar marked with sanity value had been gnawed off. Good guy, it turns out that sanity value means this. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the long black hair in the corridor behind has already chased after him, spreading across the ground little by little, as if they were reaching out to grab his little hands. Pale limbs round the corner. Little red comb and comb in front of the mirror, one comb to the end, smart and beautiful, two combs to the end, happiness is not far away. Babbling, intermittent nursery rhymes came from the hair, and the innocent voice echoed in the empty corridor, which was simply creepy. The lights in the corridor flickered, dimly illuminating the weird limbs twisted and crawling through the hair. When Jianyan's hair stood on end, he turned his head and ran wildly. This time, he no longer rushed forward dully, but was a little more cautious and careful, nimbly avoiding the blood dripping from the top of his head and the long hair curling towards him from the ground along the way. The further you go, the faster the blood drips and the harder it becomes to dodge. Finally, under Wen Jianyan's wild running all the way, the stairway was finally in sight. A number printed in blood red on the wall, one side of the stairs went up and the other side went down, and both ends were submerged in darkness, as if it was some kind of ominous omen. Wen Jianyan rushed upstairs without thinking. However, before he could take a few steps, he stopped abruptly and stood stiffly on the spot. Standing at the stairs, the young man turned his head to look at the pitch-black hair chasing him in the distance. Under the half-bright light, his face showed a rare look of hesitation. Chatting in the 789326QWK live broadcast room was in full swing. "Come on, I've decided to leave. Is the anchor going to go upstairs or downstairs?" "It's definitely going upstairs. I can't get out of the dormitory building. I can't run away from such a big place downstairs. There are 6 minutes left in the chase. If I go downstairs now, I will definitely die. Come on, you know the host doesn't know about the fact that you can't get out of the dormitory building. I bet he will go downstairs. I have to put my bets in perspective. I also bet that the anchor will go downstairs. Have you forgotten?" The old woman in the cafeteria gave the anchor advice to stay away from the 4th floor. "If I were him, I would definitely not run upstairs." This suggestion is actually correct, but in this hidden mission, the door of life is on the 4th floor instead. Tisk tisk, what a pity. Don't look like a prophet in the front, okay? The 2 NPCs in the toilet have given reminders before, and the 4th floor has mentioned it several times. According to the previous operation of this anchor, I don't believe he will miss such an obvious one. Clearance reminder. The above user comments involve spoilers and are only open to the audience. The strands of hair are getting closer. The expression on Wen Jianyan's face became more and more vacillating, as if he was wavering between 2 options. Finally, he seemed to have finally made up his mind. The young man took back his steps, then turned around and rushed downstairs without looking back. In the live broadcast room, some people were happy while others were sad. "Ha ha 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 one, I said he must run downstairs." Most people would want to run straight away when encountering such a thing. This anchor was so smart just now, how could he be so stupid at this juncture? This is so boring. I thought this anchor could last a little longer, but I didn't expect it to be cold again. I'm speechless. Can I get back the money I tipped just now? At seeing Wen Jianyan go straight to the exit after going downstairs, the barrage became more impatient. What's the use of rushing to the exit now? Follow it in the hall. Although 6 minutes is a bit of a limit, it's not impossible. What's the rush upstairs? How can you be so real after watching a live broadcast? Anyway, it's a big deal to watch it in another live broadcast room. And to be honest, I've always wanted to see this anchor roll over. That's right, isn't it just for fun to watch the novice live broadcast? I really want to watch the high IQ boss pass the test, so why don't I just go to the senior anchor? Even so, the number of people who had been at the peak in the live broadcast room began to decline, from more than 2,000 to 1,000. Wen Jianyan quickened his pace and headed straight for the exit. The duty room next to it rushed over. He didn't prepare any tools for picking the lock this time. Instead, he raised his long legs and kicked it violently, kicking the door crookedly with a bang, and smashing it to the ground with a bang. What does he want? No? He is addicted to running to the duty room? This time is different from last time. Why did he go to the duty room again? Tisk tisk tisk, these low-level anchors are like this. They all like to drill into their comfort zone, so they are stupid and really meaningless. Wen Jianyan rushed in, went straight to the closet, opened the closet door with astonishing skill, opened the hidden compartment, and grabbed something from it. He turned around. At this moment, the tide-like hair had already rushed to the front of the duty room, and the jet-black hair climbed up the wall, crossed the threshold and the window, and headed towards the prey that had been staring at it for a long time. The lights in the hall began to flicker under the influence of some strange force. The pale limbs twisted and deformed, crawling among the piles of hair. Wen Jianyan took a deep breath slowly, his forehead and neck were covered with cold sweat, his fingers twitched slightly under the pressure of extreme tension, and his palms were damp and cold. He stabilized his trembling and began to hum, "Little red comb, comb and comb in front of the mirror. Once you comb to the end, you will be smart and beautiful." If you comb it to the end, you will never be far away from happiness. If you comb it to the end, you will be happy. Just now, he was still sneering and sarcastic, and the barrage that kept shouting bad was suddenly shocked. Wait, this tune. This lyrics. Is the one in front losing his memory? Isn't that what the boss just hummed? No, no, this boss never sang the last line. I know. Grass. The song hummed by that old witch has always been incomplete, and now the boss's singing is actually incomplete, but now it is put together. Wen Jianyan slowly raised his hand and opened his palm. In the center of his white and slender palms lay combs. Like the whole building, the time on this comb seems to have turned back. Although it is grey and dark, you can vaguely see the once bright red, and even the broken teeth have become complete again. The swimming hair stopped moving and became quiet. Behind the young man, the drawer that was pulled open vigorously has not been closed. Among the messy debris that was turned over, lay a few yellowed photos. Before the dust had had time to settle, two figures, one large and one small, could be seen above. A tall woman was standing in the amusement park, and beside her was a 13 or 14-year-old girl. Her black hair was tied into a big braid and hung down her shoulders. The two of them were very close to each other, their faces blurred by time, but you can still see the happy smiles on the faces of the two, frozen in that narrow photo. A few words were written in pen below, "Happy birthday Xiaja." Wen Jianyan took a deep breath, and slowly stepped forward. "Xiaja, Mom. Mom misses you so much." The bullet screen was dead silent. What the hell? Chapter 6. The swimming hair is motionless. They densely cover the walls and the ground, as if some kind of shadow persists in reality. In the dead silence, under the dark pressure hood, the passage of time seemed to lose its meaning. Wen Jianyan stood where he was, with sweat dripping from his forehead and palms, and the comb lying in his palms became wet. He has no idea. But, the guess should be right. After all, this hidden item was dug out from the hidden compartment of the old hag's cabinet in the first place. At that time, he was very puzzled. After all, the things hidden in the dark cabinet looked ordinary, and could even be regarded as garbage, but they were deeply hidden by the owner in the most hidden place. If you don't follow the rules, you will be punished. In the cafeteria, the anchor choked on his hair because of this. That is to say, the ghost is punishing the students according to the old witch's code of conduct. In short, it is helping her. It's almost like a child with a lack of self-awareness, unconditionally attached to and obeyed by his mother. The comb in the dark, the hair in the sink, the familiar humming, the corresponding lyrics, and the canteen aunt's hesitation when talking about Teacher Yang. These broken clues are connected together in the mind, and the incomplete concept is gradually formed. In the end, when Jianyan made up his mind, turned around and went straight to the first floor. Whether this is the Shenman or not can only be a gamble. After an unknown amount of time, the hair finally started moving again. The dark, thick hair receded slowly, thinning and shortening little by little, gradually revealing the pale limbs hidden in the middle. The little girl was on all fours, her joints were twisted in all directions strangely, her neck was raised, her pale face was lifted up, her facial features were as blurred as a melted wax figure, and she stared fixedly ahead with her black eye sockets. "Mother." She repeated these two words blankly, with complete doubts and strangeness in her voice. There is drama. Judging from the opponent's current performance, the odds of winning are 50%. Therefore, he seized the precious opportunity in front of him without hesitation. "Little G." The voice of the young man was deliberately suppressed, rough but also with a bit of feminine softness. The articulation and pauses were all subtly similar to Mr. Yang's. The just right choking and subtly concealed the sense of disobedience. Even the audience in the live broadcast room, guys, after hearing this, I couldn't help but feel a little dazed for a while. "Don't you remember, Mom?" The little girl repeated in confusion, "Remember, gotta." She tilted her head, and faced Wen Jianyan with that fuzzy face, as if trying to remember. Wen Jianyan waited without saying a word. His heart was beating wildly by his ears, his fingers were slightly numb under the excessive tension, his back was wet and sticky, and when the cold wind blew past, it brought a biting chill, and under the strong pressure, the bends of his legs trembled a little. However, judging from his expression, he was uncharacteristically calm. Xiao Ji. The little girl recalled blankly. Taking advantage of this gap, Wen Jianyan quickly glanced at the upper right corner. The life value is full, and the sanity value is only half. This place is really too narrow. If the opponent launches an attack now, he has no way to escape. However, the remaining time of the chase is 4 minutes. Even if the opponent doesn't recall anything, as long as he delays for 3 minutes, he can pass the level. Just hold on, hold on, hold on. At this moment, a sudden ding sound came from beside the ear. Congratulations to the anchor for accurately locating the key props. The special line in the hidden branch line is now unlocked. Wen Jianyan was taken aback. What? The barrage in the live broadcast room was a sensation. Special line. He actually opened a special line. Has anyone seen it? Tell me, has DKI Middle School opened this line before? The highest unlocking progress in history of this copy is 72%. It is unlikely that this special line has been opened. I declare that he is the strongest rookie in my heart. Could this be a vest? Could this be a vest? If this anchor is a newcomer, I'll have diarrhea on my head. He only listened to the mechanical voice next to his ear and continued, now you will be issued a live broadcast special task, while singing, combing Xiaojia's hair. After starting the mission, your chase battle will stop timing, and it will end automatically after completing the special mission. The countdown in the upper right corner stopped just right, and the 4 numbers of 315 were so bright that it was very obtrusive. Wen Jianyan's face froze. He stood there expressionless, his eyes moved down, and slowly landed on the broken-toothed comb in his palm. I'm so stupid, really. I only knew that this comb was a prop to prove my identity and awaken the memory of the other party, but I didn't expect to be able to start the special task in the live broadcast room. Wen Jianyan took a deep breath and gritted her back molars viciously. Never mind. Anyway, it's hard to ride a tiger now, so let's just use a dead horse as a living horse doctor. He took a step forward, slowly and cautiously pulled the stool away from the table, then stretched out his hand to Xiaojia, who was not far away, and said in a particularly gentle tone, come. Xiaojia tilted her head, her confusion deepened on her blurred face. Look, your hair is messed up. I'll comb it for you. The opponent still didn't move. Be obedient. Wen Jianyan lowered his voice a little, imitating the majestic appearance of the old hag. Xiaojia hesitated for 2 seconds, and finally crawled towards Wen Jianyan's direction. She climbed onto the wooden chair with pale thin arms, and sat up with her twisted limbs little by little. She faced the dusty mirror, and her thick and long black hair fell to the ground and spread out on the ground. Wen Jianyan raised her hand and combed down the other person's hair. The moment it touched the top of the girl's head, there was a sharp pain from the fingertips, and the strands of hair wriggled as if they were alive, and they were deeply drawn into the pulp of the fingers, greedily sucking and devouring his flesh and blood. Wen Jianyan's heart trembled, and she began to feel a little dizzy. A creepy feeling suddenly struck, as if the surrounding gaps were full of peeping eyes, casting malicious gazes from all directions. The instinct to flee in the face of danger screamed, and at that moment, every cell in him screamed, forget the comb. Run! Hurry up! Hurry up! Otherwise it will be too late. Calm! Wen Jianyan bit the tip of her tongue fiercely, forcing her body, which was about to escape, to stay where it was. He glanced at the upper right corner. Both health and sanity were gnawed off a large chunk, and the color of the blood bar also changed from green to yellow, while the sanity was even more dangerous, already leaning toward orange. He took a slow, deep breath and sang, Little Red Comb, comb it in front of the mirror. Xiaojia didn't seem to know what was going on behind the scenes. She sat on the chair with her back to Wen Jianyan, gently shaking her pale legs, and hummed softly following the tune. I don't know if it's Wen Jianyan's illusion, but the facial features of the small face reflected in the mirror seemed to be much clearer than before. Comb to the bottom. I remember. Xiaojia spoke suddenly, and said slowly with some difficulty, Mom, although she is very strict, sometimes she will get angry and scary, but she is very gentle to me, she will sing while brushing my hair, and she will also braid my beautiful braids. Crush to the end, smart and beautiful. The teeth of the comb slide down through the hair. The little girl's words were confused, with a dullness and clumsiness that did not match her age. I'm stupid. I can't go out. There will be bad people when I go out. My mother can't protect me. The blood strips on Wen Jianyan's head continued to drop, his fingertips had been eaten until they were bloody, and the bones could be vaguely seen. Hot red blood oozes out, dyeing the broken comb red, turning it into a shiny, brand new ruddy color. 2 combs to the end, happiness is not far away. After the second comb, the mirror reflected the little girl's gradually clear facial features, and the hair that had grown to the ground had been shortened to waist length. Mom, yes, I'm sorry. I shouldn't not listen to you, eavesdrop on other people's conversations, I shouldn't, sneak out of the room at night. Xiaojia sobbed, raised her pale little hand and wiped it indiscriminately, Mom, I'm sorry, I just wanted. I'm afraid they really made a wish and took you away. 3 combs comb to the end, combining one's heart and one's intention. One last click. The comb was slowly combed down, and the speed of the blood bar falling finally slowed down. At the end, there was only a little blood skin left in the sanity point, which barely stopped before it was used up. The girl's hair no longer squirmed, and became docile and smooth, as black as ink, almost indistinguishable from normal people's long hair. Xiaojia sobbed and raised her eyes, looked at Wen Jianyan from the mirror, sobbed with tears in her eyes, I make a wish, I want to help my mother. Those adults say that I am your drag, because of me, you must work so hard, and you will be so fierce to other people. I don't want to be a burden, I want to protect my mother. With my help, is Mom more relaxed? Not as tired as before. Wen Jianyan was silent. He turned around and picked up the faded and dull hair tie from the dark compartment behind his back. As if his blood-stained fingers were not affected by the wound at all, he smoothly picked up Xiaojia's long hair at the back of her head, and skillfully braided it for her. A braid with a bow at the end. Exactly as in the photo. After doing all this, he gave a soft hum. As if she had heard a satisfactory answer, Xiaojia laughed through tears. She clapped her hands happily, Great, I can help. In the mirror, the little girl's figure became thinner little by little, and she could only vaguely see that happy smile. The girl with the pigtails in a bow tie sniffled, carefully raised her hand to grab Wen Jianyan's sleeve, and said with great affection, Mom, I miss you too. Along with that, her figure gradually became transparent until finally it disappeared. Only the last sentence fluttered and dissipated in the air. Wen Jianyan looked at the empty duty room, his eyelashes drooping slightly, and there was no expression on his face. He turned around and picked up the photo from the hidden compartment of the drawer. In the photo, a mother and daughter, one big and one small, are standing in the amusement park, smiling happily at the camera. At this moment, a prompt sounded in the ear, ding. Your chasing battle has been automatically cleared, and the hidden branch is complete. The moment the voice fell, Wen Jianyan felt dizzy for a while, and the next second, when he opened his eyes again, he found that he had returned to the entrance of the cafeteria. The turmoil in the cafeteria continued, and the ding-dang-dang system sound kept ringing in my ears. Ding! The live special task is completed, and the special line is unlocked. Reward points, 5,000 live mission rewards are being calculated for you, dungeon exploration degree, 50% bonus points, 5,000 current plot modification rate, 62% reward points, 20,000 remaining points in the account, 30,900. Wow, congratulations on becoming the richest streamer in the entire dungeon. Unlock achievement. With all due respect, everyone here is a poor ghost. Wen Jianyan was still poor just now, but now he suddenly became the anchor with the most points in the entire dungeon. He was a little dizzy from the news. In addition to being pleasantly surprised, Wen Jianyan was a little uneasy. There won't be any traps here? It is detected that the points in the anchor account are greater than 1000, and the system store is being unlocked for you. Do you want to open the system store? Wen Jianyan made up his mind. Open. The shopping mall interface of the level anchor unfolded in front of him, and the shopping malls of other levels were all grey and unlocked. Wen Jianyan tried to click. Although other interfaces can be opened, all the products and points inside are all state. However, at the top of the interface of the most advanced level anchor shop, there is a dazzling golden coupon. Soul contract termination letter. The redemption method below is still locked. Wen Jianyan's gaze stayed on the golden coupon for a few seconds before switching back to the store interface of his errant anchor. Although only a limited area has been opened, the variety of goods here is still very wide. Concealment robe. You will not be discovered by any monsters within 1 minute. Stand-in puppet. Create a puppet with your breath, which lasts for 1 minute. Guiding hand. Point out the location of a hidden item for you. Level limit, common, book of contract, amulet, etc. The effects of the remarks below each item are eye-catching. Wen Jianyan glanced at the price list, and suddenly his eyes went dark. Good guy, any life-saving prop needs at least 5,000 points. Isn't this killing people? He can see through the face of profiteers in this live broadcast room. Wen Jianyan closed the system store expressionlessly. He redeemed 3.5 hours of survival time, and then deposited the remaining 9,900 points into the account. There must be a reason for so many life-saving props in the system store. Wen Jianyan was keenly aware of the danger signs. Therefore, he didn't use up all his points this time. After all, there might be a crisis moment when he had to exchange shop props to survive. Just before the light screen was about to be turned off, his gaze inadvertently passed the upper right corner again. Wen Jianyan was taken aback. This time it was definitely not his illusion. There is a little green in the center of the flower pot icon, which is particularly conspicuous against the grey background. Sprouted? He reached out and poked the icon. A line of text popped up. Product name, Apple Seedlings Wen Jianyan. I already know this, thank you. He wasn't sure what he had done to cause this apple seedling to germinate. After all, he seldom turned on the light screen, and he didn't take extra points to irrigate and fertilize. However, based on the urination in the live broadcast room, Wen Jianyan dared to conclude that the growth of the apple seedling had absolutely nothing to do with the passage of time. As for its role is unknown. We can only continue to wait and see for the time being. Soon, the turmoil in the cafeteria finally subsided. The anchors sat back in their seats with lingering fear. This time, no one dared to dislike the swill-like food. The anchors looked disheveled, and they ate everything in the bowl with difficulty. After washing the rice bowl and putting it back in place, the anchors rushed back to the dormitory building before the gate control at 9:30. Kong dang crazy rummaging sounded from the duty room. All the drawers were pulled out impatiently and opened, the wardrobe door was slammed, and the mattress, sheets and pillows were all scattered on the ground, and there was a mess everywhere. The anchors looked at each other in panic, and stood at the door of the dormitory building, not daring to move forward. Until the door of the duty room was pushed open with a bang, and the tall figure of the old hag appeared inside the door. Everyone was terrified. The old hag has disheveled hair, bloodshot eyes, a crazy and furious expression, and bulging veins on her distorted face, looking like a ghost. She gritted her teeth and stared at the anchors standing at the door. Has any of you ever entered my room? The woman swept across the anchors with a terrifying gaze, and the crazy aura emanating from her body was terrifying. There is a small red cloth bag, which one of you took it? No, no, no. The anchors shook their heads in panic, for fear of being targeted by the other party. Thief! The old hag clenched her teeth. There is a thief among you. A nervous chuckle escaped her throat. If I catch him, I'll make him pay for what he did. Suddenly, the old witch seemed to suddenly remember something. The woman stared and looked around the room with crazy eyes. Where's Xiaoyan? Where's the intern teacher? Did any of you see him? The anchors huddled together in panic and shook their heads vigorously. Kong Shixing boldly said, I saw it in the cafeteria just now, and then he went to the backstage with the aunt in the cafeteria who cooked for us, and then I never saw him again. The old witch's eyes fell on Kong Shixing's body. Her cloudy and protruding eyes did not blink, as if she was thinking about the authenticity of the other party's words. Finally, the skin on her face twitched. I want to go out for a while. You are not allowed to go out in the dormitory building. The lights are turned off at 10 o'clock in the evening. After the lights are turned off, I will come back to inspect. If I see any of you still outside your room, you will have a good fruit. Saying that, the old hag turned around and walked out without looking back. The anchors stood still in shock. What's going on? That NPC stuff was stolen. It seems like this. Who stole it? Player or NPC? Whispering voices sounded in front of the hall. Kong Shixing and his two teammates stood aside, and the three of them discussed in low voices. That NPC named Xiaowen is very suspicious. Indeed. Kong Shixing showed a thoughtful expression, and what he took away may be some very important props. In short, we will also look for that NPC within the scope of our ability to see if we can get it from him. Get the props on him, no matter how bad he is, he can tell that crazy woman about his whereabouts, maybe it can give us a life. In short, let's go back to the dormitory now, the identity card has not been fully unlocked yet. The players walked towards the dormitory building, and soon disappeared. The air fell into dead silence. In the shadowed blind spot outside the dormitory building, the young man bent down, poked out half of his head quietly, and looked around cautiously. Great, no one. Wen Jianyan walked out of the corner lightly and breathed a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had a quick brain just now. When he came back, he saw the abnormality in the duty room, so he quickly hid. Who knows what would have happened if caught red-handed? At this moment, the familiar mechanical voice came again, ding, it is detected that the plot deviation has reached the threshold, and the dungeon is undergoing uncontrollable changes. New story is opening, NPC Teacher Yang Alienation Countdown, 30 minutes Object of Concentration of Hatred Value, Xiaowen Wen Jianyan. 789,326. The bullet screen in the QWK live broadcast room was swiped by ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha, hatred is worth laughing to death. Ha 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 overturned the car. I don't understand. In the book Decay Middle School, there were anchors who took this prop before, but I haven't seen the old witch have such a big reaction. Because the plot modification is too high. Speaking of which, I've seen this dungeon quite a few times, but I really haven't heard of this plot now? Damn. New line. Shocked. If the anchor can really pass this new book, he must make a lot of money. Hehe, can you just let it go? I think the anchor is almost dead, and being wanted by NPC and other anchors, it's not 100% finished. At the same time, the logo outside the live broadcast hall changed again. Duck AI Middle School Hall difficulty rating, D. The highest unlock progress in history, 72% viewing value, D, and the difficulty level has been raised to D+. The viewing value flickered, slowly changing from D and to C. On the live broadcast plaza, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the shortcut entry of the Dungeon Duck AI Middle School jumped up again, entering the first page of the recommendation list. External audience. What's the situation? What exactly happened in this low-difficulty simple dungeon? Chapter 7. After a chasing battle, Wen Jianyan knew the layout of the dormitory building like the back of his hand. He cleverly took advantage of a few blind spots and sneaked back to the room where he woke up before anyone noticed. It's no different here than it was when we left a few hours ago. Dirty walls, cramped iron beds, books stacked in disorder. Wen Jianyan glanced over the mirror hanging on the cabinet in a hurry, not daring to linger on it too much. When he just woke up, through the mirror, he inadvertently met the eyes of the face under the bed. Even now, he still seems to be able to feel that vaguely terrifying sight coming from a corner of the room, which made his hair stand on end with chills. Wen Jianyan took a deep breath, collected himself, and then walked slowly towards the mirror. He deliberately didn't look inside this time, but directly took it off the cabinet door. In the previous hidden branch, both the NPC and Zyja mentioned a crucial mirror. This made Wen Jianyan immediately think of his own experience after entering the dungeon. After he glanced at the person under the bed in the mirror, the initial 20-minute survival time was determined. And if you recall carefully, every time the ghost appeared after that, it was in the mirror. There might be some connection here. Wen Jianyan tore off a pillow towel from the bed, covered the mirror, and then carefully looked down at the mirror in his hand. This is a very ordinary vanity mirror, with an oval shape, and the light green plastic frame is somewhat faded, whitish in the dark. There is no compartment on the back, and there is nothing to hide things. Nothing special inside or out. But Wen Jianyan gently stroked the uneven surface under the mirror with his fingertips, as well as the rough holes drilled by hand on the top of the frame, with a thoughtful look on his face. In other words, this is supposed to be the kind of vanity mirror placed on the table. However, it has now been removed from the base, punched on the top, and hung on the cabinet. Wen Jianyan raised his head and hurriedly looked around the room. Finally, his eyes fixed on a corner of the table. In a messy pile of books, there is a small blank space, which looks as if it has been deliberately left out. Wen Jianyan walked in and took a closer look. There are rectangular grey marks left on the tabletop, as if something was placed on it for a long time. He turned the mirror upwards to make a virtual comparison. Almost the same size. At this moment, the pillow covering on the mirror suddenly fell down, as if being pulled by some unknown force. It slid down suddenly. Wen Jianyan was startled, subconsciously wanted to reach out to fish, but could only barely touch the rough edge of the fabric. The pillow slipped from between his fingers and fell to the ground. The air seemed to stagnate. Wen Jianyan maintained a half-bent posture, his eyes were fixed on the pillow towel, a thin layer of cold sweat emerged from his forehead, as if a burst of cold exhalation slowly crawled over the back of his neck. It made his scalp tingle. The room was eerily quiet. Here is the glass copy. It stands to reason that it is unlikely that what has been experienced will happen again. He said it over and over again in his heart. Wen Jianyan closed her eyes forcefully, clenched her teeth, straightened up little by little, and forced herself to look into the mirror. The mirror faces the upper bunk on the right near the door. On the originally empty bed, a figure of a person appeared at some point. She was wearing an old-fashioned student uniform, with her back facing the mirror, her long hair hanging behind her, and she was sitting quietly on the bed at the moment. However, judging from her curvy and the style of her school uniform, she now should actually be facing the front. Wen Jianyan's hand trembled, and he almost didn't drop the mirror. In the mirror, the woman's long hair moved slightly, and the head slowly turned around frame by frame snapped. Wen Jianyan snapped the mirror upside down. He took a deep breath and slowly turned his head to look behind him. The bunk in the mirror was empty. Unknowingly, Wen Jianyan was already in a cold sweat. He took out his ID card and glanced at it. There are 3 hours left in the survival time. It seems that his behavior just now did not trigger any death trap, so, the person in the mirror just now may not be dangerous, but some kind of reminder. But, how to be sure? Wen Jianyan thought for a few seconds, then opened the hidden live broadcast interface. A tsunami of barrage poured in, densely covering the screen, and it was more than 10 times more lively than before. He glanced at the upper right corner, and there were more than 5,000 people online in real time. Although he had a hunch for a long time, after seeing such a rapid increase in the live broadcast data, Wen Jianyan couldn't help but smile a little sincerely. The host has opened the barrage. Please look familiar. Don't lick it, it's useless to be familiar with this kind of newcomer, the anchor may not even survive tonight. Don't open your eyes and talk nonsense. How many newcomers can pull the rating of the entire dungeon on their own? I guess it's Pippi who came to Novice Village to play a few games. So whose vest is the host? Tell me the decoded barrage. I want to know. Please, let me tell you about the anchor. Let's pay attention to your tuber reward points 50. Ask for decoding plus 1 reward points 80. Good. Well rolled. Roll it up for me. Wen Jianyan remained calm, turning a blind eye to all the bullet screens asking about vests, and greeted with a smile, I didn't expect to see so many new friends in the live broadcast room after only a few hours. Hello everyone. He scanned the rapidly refreshed barrage, picked out a few fans with high rewards, thanked them, and then changed the subject. Have you seen the person in the mirror just now? The young man glanced at the bunk on the iron bed not far away, and frowned sincerely. This is too scary, I really don't want to get close to that place at all. There was a troubled look on his face, however, I always feel that there will be clues. Shall I go up and take a look? A simple question, so natural that people don't think about it at all, but it brings the topic to a direction where more information can be obtained without a trace. The barrage suddenly became lively, and the audience watching the live broadcast booed one after another. Go. Of course I will. Hurry up, don't be cowardly, the anchor, go. 100 reward points. Exciting, I have seen this dungeon several times, but this is the first time I have seen the ghost in the mirror. I moved to the small bench and waited. Reward points 100. First time seeing? That's it. According to the information revealed in the previous barrage, it is estimated that they have seen many anchors pass the level of this dungeon called Duck AI Middle School. Since they have never seen the person in the mirror, it means that she has a high probability actively attacked the anchor. Then it is more likely to be a clue. Although he was clear in his heart, Wen Jianyan's face became more and more struggling, as if hesitating. Finally, after making the atmosphere of the barrage to the hottest, he sighed and let go very helplessly. Since everyone says that, then for everyone's viewing experience, I'll climb up and have a look. And with the buffer of the barrage just now, the creepy feeling has been diluted a lot. After hiding the panel, Wen Jianyan climbed onto the bed swiftly. Under the weight of a grown man, the iron frame creaked unbearably. The bed was covered with a thin cotton mattress, which was so compacted that it lost its elasticity. There were a few faded stickers on the wall, and the edge of the bed sheet was neatly tucked under the mattress. When she reached the head of the bed, Wen Jianyan stopped moving. There was something wrong with the touch under the palm. He lifted the mattress and took out a thin notebook from underneath. There are 2 beautiful characters written on the title page of the notebook, Su Yuan. Most of the contents inside have been blurred, only 2 or 3 short diaries are still readable. On X month X day of X year, Sunny, this girl is really scary. I always feel that she has a gloomy temperament. Every time I stay in a dormitory alone with her, I feel very uncomfortable. In the water room this afternoon, Xin said some mocking words, although a little it was too much, but I also laughed and agreed, but as soon as I went out, I saw the back of her leaving, and I don't know if she heard it. Disturbed. Year X month X day, cloudy day. I wanted to apologize several times, but every time I saw her back, I didn't dare to go forward. After the sketching class ended today, I secretly followed behind her. I wanted to find an opportunity to talk to her, but I never found the opportunity. I followed her all the way to the woods, and saw her breaking up ham sausages and feeding them to stray cats. The cat's name is Xiaju. Wanted to go up to her and talk to her, and I heard Xiaju's scream. I saw her grab Xiaju and put her hands around its throat. Xiaju's claws scratched out long streaks of blood on her hand, but she didn't move, as if she didn't feel anything. Her hand was tightly strangling Xiaju, and then stabbed into its crotch with an art knife. Neck. Xiaju quickly stopped moving. I was shaking all over, and I didn't dare to move when I stood still. I should have gone up to stop it, so that Xiaju might not die, but I am really cowardly. If only I was half as brave as Xin. After realizing that my body could move, I ran back without looking back, lying in the quilt and shivering all the time. I heard the sound of her opening the door and coming back. I heard her standing by my bed for a long time, and I heard the sound of water dripping on the ground, but I dared not move or speak. Please, let's go. I see nothing, I hear nothing. On X month X day of X year, the rain something has changed, but I can't tell. I seem to have changed in the mirror, but no matter how I wipe the mirror, it is blurry and I can't see anything clearly. On X month X day of X year, the rain today, the class monitor sent out the wrong paper again, and sent me her report card. More and more people called me by the wrong name. What's going on? Year X month X day, cloudy day. I went to talk to Xin after class, but Xin looked at me with very strange eyes, and left after a few perfunctory words. Why? Am I doing something wrong? On X month X day of X year, the rain. It's the weekend, but I didn't wait for my parents who came to pick me up. I went to ask the teacher at the security office, but the teacher told me in surprise that Su Yuan's parents had already taken Su Yuan home. But I am Su Yuan. On X month X day of X year, the rain. The mirror is no longer blurry. But that face inside is not mine. When Jianyan flipped through the pages one by one, looking at the increasingly messy handwriting on it, goosebumps came out layer by layer on his back. He couldn't help but think of the monster in the mirror in the duty room downstairs. As he gradually approached him, that pale face with simple features that only had lines left changed little by little until it became more and more like his own appearance. When Jianyan shuddered, he collected himself and continued to flip backwards. On the next page of the notebook, there were only a few messy big characters. Where did my face go? In the dead silent bedroom, only the sound of pages turning could be heard. Go to the next page. The shocking 5 red letters are so powerful that they almost cut through the paper. Have you seen it? Next second. Heck, heck, heck! It was as if the neck bones were twisting one by one, coming from behind, and there was a tooth-piercing clucking sound. Did you see it? A female voice sounded faintly behind his ear, and the cold tone seemed to be steeped in malice. When Jianyan's hair on the back of his neck exploded. It was too close. The voice seemed to be coming from the back of his head, and he could almost draw a picture in his mind. The head that was completely twisted to the back slowly turned around, looking at himself in front of him little by little. Slowly revealing that faces that lost their faces. The temperature in the air dropped to freezing point, as if it could freeze a person's muscles and bones in an instant. Before he had time to think about it, he categorically told a lie. Have. The clack sound stopped. The dormitory fell into deathly silence again. However, when Jianyan could clearly feel that he was not alone, that something was silently standing behind him at this moment, watching and waiting. I know where your face is. The young man sat upright on the spot without looking back, just facing the air, and asked, Do you want to take it back? I can help you. His voice was calm, as if carrying extremely strong confidence, with an irresistible certainty. However, no one could see that the warm sweat slid down from his forehead, leaving a cold wet mark on his cheek. Time passed by every minute and every second, and the calculation standards seemed to be out of balance. Wen Jianyan stared at a small dot in front of her eyes, feeling a little dizzy. The heart beats wildly in the chest cavity, the blood hits the eardrums, and the sharp white noise pulls away from the ears. He counted down in his head. 9, 8, 7. The moment the time returns to 0, he will open the store as quickly as possible to buy life-saving items. However, before that, Wen Jianyan wanted to take a gamble. Take a gamble that you guessed right. 5, 4, 3. Suddenly, a familiar mechanical sound sounded, ding. Congratulations to the host for triggering the hidden object, Epic. To start the mission, please find Su Yuan's lost face. After the task is completed, you will get the qualification to open the hidden item, Epic. The moment the voice fell, the temperature around him began to rise slowly, and the feeling of thorns on his back, as if he was being stared at by someone, disappeared. Wen Jianyan turned her stiff neck and carefully glanced behind her. Empty. It was as if a boulder fell to the ground in an instant, and the excessive pressure suddenly disappeared, making Wen Jianyan's limbs a little numb. Well, it's over. According to the information he got from the audience, this Su Yuan had never appeared in the previous live broadcast. Coupled with the content in the diary, she herself was more like a victim. It is far less dangerous than the female ghost in the mirror before, and the content of her diary is also very clear. Therefore, Wen Jianyan has never changed his original judgment. Like clues, not danger. Looks like he's betting right. Epic hidden object mission. Is he really going to find the epic hidden item? Absolutely, this one really has a NB on him. Why are you so excited about the previous one? It's not like you haven't unlocked epic level hidden items in other more difficult live broadcasts. As for you don't need to show your sense of superiority in front of me. I think you watch less live broadcasts, right? Most anchors are newbies, let alone legends. Even ordinary hidden items are hard to find, even if it is a new account. At the beginning, you can not only get difficult hidden items, but also start legendary item missions. This is really the first time I have seen it. Wen Jianyan's upper body swayed, and he slowly reached out to touch the side railing, and then leaned out with a disheveled face vomit. There was booing in the barrage. Bah! Don't pretend to be you. Although the anchor's tuba has not been revealed yet, there is no need to pretend to be cute so simply and rudely. It's over. If it's not pretending, then the anchor has something to eat. He's new here, don't you know? It's because of this anchor that the difficulty and viewing rating of the live broadcast hall of Duck AI Middle School have all been raised. How could it be a real dish? The old viewers who have been in this live broadcast room from the beginning are dumbfounded. What? What is the one in front talking about? The bullet screen of the new audience is covered. Ah? You don't know. I also came here because of this point, otherwise how could I come to see this kind of level square? +1 +1. Plus 10,086, go out and have a look if you don't believe me, the rating of the entrance will not lie. The number of barrages fluctuated sharply, first decreased significantly, and then increased again. The audience who ran back were all in a daze. Fuck, really, the rating has really changed. Even if it is the trumpet of the boss, it is really too strong to be able to reach this level with such limited resources. Damn it, it doesn't matter if he is a rookie or a boss, I announce that I will live in this studio from now on. If you invest in shares in advance, you won't lose money. Asterisk with a pale face, Wen Jianyan crawled off the bed with some exhaustion. The nervous twitching in my stomach has finally disappeared, but the physical discomfort has not completely disappeared. The mirror that was upside down on the table disappeared and was replaced by a small key with a faded nameplate on it, which seemed to be the key of a certain locker. Under the key was a crumpled note with a line scrawled on it, room 408 on the 4th floor, Cabinet number 368, rental period, before 1 o'clock in the morning. It seems that this is the time limit for him to complete this so-called task. But room 408? Wen Jianyan remembered the passage he overheard in the women's bathroom before. The room where the mirror is located is the 408 dormitory. Is there any connection here? Wen Jianyan read the note over and over several times, but found no other clues. He put the note and key in his pocket. At this moment, the bell rang from downstairs. Dang dang dang, the bell struck 10. Clear and loud, as if amplified by some unknown force, so that everyone in the dormitory building can hear it. Snapped. The lights in the corridor suddenly went out. It's time to turn off the lights in the distance, the voice of the old witch came from downstairs. Her voice became extremely weird. The originally thick voice was mixed with a hissing sound. It looked weird, and it looked extraordinarily weird in the boundless darkness, making people get goosebumps for no reason. You bad bastards, don't let me find out that you are still outside the dormitory, hee hee. Ding! The familiar mechanical voice sounded in the ears of each anchor. Live mission has been updated as if to push everyone into the depths of nightmare and fear. The voice without emotion continued to say, release task, leave the dormitory after lights out and explore the campus in order to bring a better viewing experience to the audience. Please ensure that the live broadcast is unblocked, and do not disconnect. At the same time, Wen Jianyan heard a ding in his ear. Immediately afterwards, a few lines of words appeared in front of my eyes. NPC Teacher Yang Alienation Countdown, 1 second NPC Alienation completed. Object of concentration of hatred value, Xiao Wen. Under the host's unremitting efforts to kill and persistent provocations, you have finally become the target of the NPC's hatred value. Congratulations to the host for this honor. The whole world celebrates, gratifying, and congratulations. Wen Jianyan. I have a bad word that I don't know if I should say it or not. Chapter 8. After hearing the mission, everyone was dumbfounded. After the experience just now, the hint given by this level dungeon has become clear. As long as you follow the rules, you will not be killed. However, after the NPC clearly stated the rule don't leave the dormitory after turning off the lights at 10 o'clock, the live broadcast system immediately updated a task that was completely opposite to the rule. Leave the dorm after lights out and explore the campus. Isn't this clearly pushing the host into a death trap? They hardly dared to imagine what kind of terrifying situation they would face if they were caught by the old hag after leaving the dormitory. The echo of the clock echoed in the air. The entire dormitory building was already surrounded by darkness, only the overhead light at the corner of the corridor was still on, and in the thick and suffocating darkness, there was a dim and weak white light shining. In bedroom 201. The rookie anchor Cheng Huiquan stood alone in the dark, and hadn't reacted to the impact of the live broadcast task. With trembling hands, he took out his ID card in a panic. The initial duration was 7 hours, and now there are 4 hours left. Cheng Huiquan's fingertips turned white, and he held the card tightly, as if this was the only way to gain a sense of security. He stared at the number above, and secretly made up his mind. He is not going to do this main line. Anyway, his initial survival time is the longest. Even if he doesn't do this mainline live broadcast task, it shouldn't matter too much. Anyway, he only needs to get points that can be exchanged for 3 hours to pass the level. He can definitely ask the audience for a reward, before the next settlement cycle is reached. Collect the points for clearing the level. He really didn't want to meet the unknown monster outside the room again. After completing the psychological construction, Cheng Huiquan turned on the light screen of the live broadcast. He tried his best to please the audience, and spared no effort to meet any of their increasingly outrageous demands in the live broadcast room, licking his face and begging for more popularity and rewards in a low voice. However, what he couldn't understand was that no matter how hard he tried, the number of people online in the live broadcast room was still dropping rapidly, unstoppably. It's like sand held tightly in the palm of your hand. The harder you use it, the faster it will be lost. Cheng Huiquan finally panicked when the number of live streamers dropped to 3 digits. If this trend continues, he will no longer be able to continue his life. Don't go, you don't go. He put that pale, sweaty face in front of the light screen, and shouted in panic, what do you want me to do? You just need to mention, I will definitely win. Cheng Huiquan was sweating all over in anxiety. There was a slight pushing sound from behind. There is a rhythmic, click and click sound. It's so light that if you focus a little, you'll be overlooked. Unexpectedly, in Cheng Huiquan's live broadcast room, the number of people who had been losing suddenly stopped, and there was even a trend of recovery. The flame of hope lit up in his eyes. Thank you everyone, I will definitely not disappoint everyone's support. However, Cheng Huiquan, who was immersed in ecstasy, didn't realize that although the number of people online in this live broadcast was increasing, the barrage was extremely quiet, almost no barrage appeared. As a novice anchor, Cheng Hua didn't know that all bullet screens involving spoilers would be blocked. However, in the dead silence, he gradually realized that something was wrong. Day. The regular impacts sounded one after another, and became clearer little by little as time went by, until it was completely impossible to ignore. Cheng Huiquan froze in place. That voice didn't come from the corridor, but echoed in this room. In the back of his head, to be precise. His eyeballs trembled nervously, and cold sweat rolled down his sunken temples. Can't go back, can't go back, can't go back. The light screen in front of him shook slightly, and the faint light illuminated the glass not far away. Like a mirror, the anchor's face distorted by fear was clearly reflected on the glass. As well as a pair of feet hanging in the air behind his back. Day. The drooping black toes hit the metal bedpost one after another, making regular sounds. Almost uncontrollably, Cheng Huiquan's gaze slowly moved upwards. He saw a person hanging from the fan. His long black hair hung down, and the smiling face half submerged in the shadow stared straight at him, as pale as melting wax. A pair of strange pure black eyes stared at him for a moment, and the corners of his mouth grinned silently. The shrill scream pierced the darkness. On the identity card, the remaining survival time dropped rapidly at a terrifying speed, as if it was being swallowed by some invisible existence, and it dropped to single digits in a blink of an eye. Snapped. In the live broadcast square of Decay Middle School, a screen went black. The anchor has been disconnected. 27463 HUD live broadcast room will close in 1 minute, countdown, 60, 59. In the live broadcast room that had turned black, the audience was delighted by death and were discussing contentedly in the barrage area. Tisk tisk tisk, what a pity that the 8-hour survival time at the beginning. This kind of anchor who resists the main task is useless to live, and has no viewing value at all. At least the few minutes before the disconnection is quite enjoyable to watch. This death is too boring, friends. I vomited blood in the 789326 QWK live broadcast room next door to Amway, and survived for 20 minutes. The sky collapsed and started. Not only did I survive until now, it is said that I have single-handedly raised the rating of the entire dungeon. Looks great. That's right, that anchor is really good, bold and careful, with a very fine mouth, and seems to be a trumpet of some big boss. And he encountered this monster at the beginning of the game. It's really an extreme comeback. It's amazing. Blow it. Why don't I believe it? Really? I'll go and see. As time goes by, the number of online people in the live broadcast room gradually decreases. 5, 4, 3, the words in blood slowly emerged before the live broadcast room was closed. Our slogan is, entertainment to death. In the dark corridor, Su Cheng fumbled in fear and walked forward step by step. His initial survival time is too short, even if he has been desperately unlocking the identity card to earn points, there is only more than an hour left. As a newcomer to the live broadcast, the number of online users and the number of rewards in the live broadcast room has always been half-deadly maintained at several hundred. Therefore, even knowing that the price of violating the rules would be high, Su Cheng had to bite the bullet and leave the dormitory. If he doesn't accept the main mission, he will definitely die. The corridor was dark, with only the lights in the stairwell flickering behind, giving off a depressing and suffocating weird atmosphere. In his live broadcast room, the audience posted bullet screens one after another. The main broadcast room has been broadcasting for a while. Why is nothing happening? Yes, I remember that this dungeon can't violate the rules. As long as it violates the rules, it will be targeted by ghosts. It's just a matter of time. I thought the anchor was lucky, but I just went to check with the anchors who chose to leave the dormitory next door. They are all safe. What's going on? Did the first few not go to the 789326QWK live broadcast room to make up lessons? Supplementary lessons? What's the situation? The plot offset of this dungeon is more than 60%, don't you know? The ghost who will target the offending anchor is directly lost in the special route. Some of the above user comments involve spoilers and will only be open to the audience at this moment. Su Cheng heard footsteps coming from the stairwell behind him. Heavy, procrastinating, and with an uncomfortably weird grinding sound. Something is walking up the stairs step by step. He turned his head in horror and looked in the direction of the sound. The huge shadow that does not look like a human being is distorted into a weird shape, and is projected onto the wall of the corridor by the dim light. The edge of the outline is wriggling, as if some kind of unstable existence is slowly changing its shape. A strong sense of danger hit. Su Cheng turned his head and ran wildly. He heard a strange woman's hee-hee smile from behind. I heard that there are students upstairs who are still wandering in the corridor after turning off the lights. The hiss in the woman's voice became clearer, and the strong malice and pleasure seemed to be able to pass through the darkness. It's really not good. The sound of footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, accompanied by a low humming, gradually approaching like a magic voice urging death. Su Cheng was sweating coldly, and ran forward with all his might. Second floor, third floor. However, I don't know if it was an illusion. No matter how fast he ran, the humming sound followed behind him like a shadow, approaching step by step unstoppably. It was as if an invisible rope was strangling his neck, tightening relentlessly little by little. Just when Su Cheng was almost desperate, suddenly, without warning, a pair of hands stretched out from the side of the darkness, and pulled him violently. Varied? Su Cheng turned pale with shock. A cold palm covered his mouth, blocking all voices abruptly. In the darkness, a pair of eyes are as bright as stars. The handsome young man approached, raised a finger to his lips, and made a shh gesture. This person seems familiar? Su Cheng leaned against the wall in shock, and nodded slightly, indicating that he would not make a sound. Wen Jianyan let go of her hand, and quietly walked to the door. He carefully pushed open a gap with his fingertips and looked out cautiously. The corridor was dark. A faint light source flickered in the distance, barely reflecting a large shadow that was slowly moving forward. The old hag's figure nearly doubled in size compared to before. Her head was pressed against the ceiling, her wet blue-gray skin seemed to be swollen, and it was extremely tight, as if it would burst open and crack in the next second, and some places that were not covered by the cloth had cracked several times, and the beads fell down with a tick, leaving a long string of wet marks on the ground. The dark eyes looked out from the gap in the skin, rolling maliciously. Before one of the eyes looked over, Wen Jianyan quickly closed the door, blocking the other party's sight. The palm of your hand was silently pressed against the cold door, and you could almost feel the heavy vibration from the footsteps outside. Really are. It has nothing to do with human appearance. As the target of the opponent's hatred, Wen Jianyan's eyelids jumped ominously. Time passed minute by minute. Finally, after an unknown amount of time, the sound of footsteps lingering at the door gradually moved away until they disappeared. Wen Jianyan breathed a sigh of relief. After the biggest threat left temporarily, his mind turned quickly. The next most important thing is to complete the face-finding task. If Su Yuan's face is not found before the specified time limit, he doesn't know what will happen, and he doesn't want to gamble on this possibility. However, the current situation is not good for him. Whether it was the alienated NPC who completely concentrated his hatred on him, or the group of senior anchors who hoped to find him, get props from him, and then sell him to the NPC to save his life, they all pushed him to the forefront. If you make a wrong step, you will be lost forever. It is very unwise to act alone at this time. Wen Jianyan turned his head to look at the anchor behind him who had just been rescued by him, and narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. He had watched the episode that happened in the cafeteria before. At that time, the anchor attracted his attention. Is a newcomer. No experience, but certain observation and analysis skills. Be calm when things happen, don't bark. What's more, since he's wandering the corridors now, he must be trying to complete the newly released main quest. Either they have the ambition and desire to grab greater benefits, or they are forced by the situation and have to take risks. Either way, there are opportunities to take advantage of. A smile flitted across Wen Jianyan's lips, like a breeze blowing, bringing with it fleeting ripples. For some unknown reason, Su Cheng suddenly shivered. What happened? Obviously the NPC outside should have left. He rubbed his nose puzzled. At this moment, the young man standing by the door turned around and walked over step by step. As the distance drew closer, Su Cheng could not help but slightly widen his eyes. The other party's glasses had already been taken off, and the soft youthful and bookish air was swept away, and without the protection of the lenses, a pair of light-colored eyes appeared sharp and clear. At this moment, those eyes were staring at him for a moment, giving people an inexplicable sense of openness and sincerity. Su Cheng stammered, You are. The back of the young man in front of him was as straight as a bamboo, and he looked at him seriously and solemnly. He took out a palm-sized wallet from his jacket pocket, and shook it out in front of the other party, with a sense of calm authority in his voice, Su Wen, Police number 598405. Su Cheng was dumbfounded. In the darkness, the ID in the young man's hand flashed by. After being stunned for 2 seconds, Su Chenzai finally came back to his senses. The other party didn't seem to notice his reaction, and was frowning and stuffing the wallet back into his pocket, and continued, In the past 5 years, the number of deaths and disappearances in Decay Middle School has been abnormally high, but all related investigations have been shelved in the end, as if there is always something hindering the investigation, but this time I did not bring the task is coming, I. The young man paused and took a deep breath, I'm here to find my sister. Sister. Su Cheng's eyes widened slightly. Su Yuan, disappeared in Decay Middle School 3 months ago. The young man lowered his eyes, covering up the flash of pain in his eyes. All my efforts were in vain, so I had no choice but to hide my identity and sneak into the school to look for it, but in the end he glanced at the closed door and said with lingering fear, Just now, what was that thing just now? A vicious product made by a certain perverted live broadcast room to torture them. But of course Su Cheng wouldn't say that to the NPC in front of him. He just shook his head, I don't know either. However, since the old witch was mentioned, Su Cheng naturally remembered one thing. He pondered for a while, and asked politely, By the way, Teacher Yang said downstairs that she seems to have lost something? Could it be? Originally, he was already prepared for the other party not to tell anything, but unexpectedly, Wen Jianyan nodded calmly and replied frankly, That's right, it's me. He took an old key out of his pocket. This is the only clue I have now. Su Cheng. Judging from his many years of experience in deciphering games, whether it is the background story shown by the other party or the special props in his hands, they are definitely only available to a key NPC. Let me help you. He volunteered. The young man was surprised. No. He frowned, and resolutely refused. This kind of thing is too dangerous, and it's not something you middle school students can touch. I can't bring you into danger. You also saw the monster just now. Do you think this kind of thing would happen in the normal world? If you were alone, you would never find your sister. Su Cheng said seriously. The young man who called himself Su Wen had a slight glint in his eyes, and a trace of hesitation flashed across his face. Seeing that the other party wanted to waver, Su Cheng hurriedly stepped forward, racked his brains, and tried his best to promote himself. Now that I have reached this point, there is no need for me to hide anything. In fact, I am not a student in this school. I have channels to obtain various supernatural props. If it is really a last resort, please believe me. I will be very useful to you. He knows how to use emotion to reason, trying to convince the other party. You must have violated the orders of your superiors by coming here this time, right? You must have a very good relationship, and you must hope that she will be found safely, right? The air fell into silence. Su Cheng waited in fear. Finally, I don't know how long it took, the young man seemed to have finally compromised, let out a breath slowly, and reluctantly said, "Wait, no matter what happens, you must follow my instructions and act." Su Cheng's eyes lit up, and he agreed as if afraid of the other party's repentance. No problem. In the live broadcast room of 789326QWK. I haven't seen a person who is so eager to sell himself for a long time. Didn't you find out that the anchor has been using words to guide the opposite anchor from the very beginning, whether it's about his identity or anything else? He always talks about 3 points and 7 points, even the props he got from the old witch he prevaricated them all, and was even led to the next place without leaving a trace. Ah! That's right, in order to form a team with this fake NPC, that anchor not only has to follow his instructions unconditionally, but also prepares to post items from the system store. It's almost like signing a contract. Grass, I love you. It's so miserable. The anchor is booming and in a trance. Ha 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 ha. The victim +1 Wen Jianyan smiled briefly. Placing victims in an unstable state of mind and manipulating them through external danger and coercion is a common formula for fraud. The studio itself has helped him complete the most difficult step. It uses the countdown to death and the threat of ghosts to create a dangerous slaughterhouse, which makes everyone in it tense and nervous. All those who are caught in such an unstable mood will, in theory, become prone to credulous authority and become the easiest target to conquer. Just like just now. The dimly lit environment, the once recognized NPC identity, and the other party's inertial thinking about game clues, as long as they are used a little, they can easily make the other party follow the script they have formulated. Su Cheng, then, where shall we go next? Wen Jianyan, go to the teaching building. The locker number on Su Yuan's note must be an important clue. He raised his eyes, patted the other person's shoulder lightly, and said slowly, "I'll go to the corridor to check the situation." Increase physical contact and induce a kind of subconscious trust. Proactively offer help and let the other party get used to relying on themselves as the stronger party. Wen Jianyan has long been familiar with these small tricks, and it has become an instinctive habit to use them at his fingertips. Su Cheng's expression relaxed obviously, he nodded, "Okay." Wen Jianyan opened the door and walked out of the corridor lightly. The figure of the other party disappeared into the darkness. Su Cheng breathed out a sigh of relief, and leaned against the wall. He opened his live broadcast room. Su Cheng's eyes widened slightly when he saw the number of people online. It was only a few hundred figures just now, and I don't know when it started to skyrocket, and now it's almost approaching 1,000. So many people? Thank you for your support. he said, a little flattered. Unexpectedly, although the number of online users has increased several times, the barrage is sporadic, and only some content that is not related to the plot is floating on the homepage. Su Cheng didn't notice this. He took a deep breath, and analyzed solemnly, I think that I may now be exposed to the deep world view in this dungeon. The storyline of that brother just now is very important. The bullet screen is full of gloating ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha, please, don't analyze it anymore, I can't bear to watch it anymore. It is indeed very important to listen to it. If you ignore this storyline, it is made up by the other side. Ha 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 ha. There are also people who hate iron but not steel, fuck, the other side is a liar. Sober up, anchor, don't be limped by fools. Some of the user comments above involve the host in the same hall, and will only be open to the audience. Su Cheng knew nothing about these barrages. After earnestly analyzing the current possible plot direction, I found that the popularity of my live broadcast room has increased, and I couldn't help being more flattered, and I became more determined that my guess was correct. At this moment, Wen Jianyan quietly leaned back and gestured to him, it's safe outside, let's go. The young man has a slender and tall figure, clear eyes, and a calm and cautious expression, giving people a strong sense of security. Su Cheng looked at the back of the other party, turned his head to his live broadcast room, and said with sincere emotion, this NPC is really a good person. Barrage. This is not just a fool, you have been sold and returned the money. Chapter 9. Su Cheng couldn't imagine that it would be such a simple matter to use the time difference and blind spots to get out of the old hag's vigilant range. The young people who were traveling with him seemed to know the internal structure of this place well. Even in the dark, they could move forward and backward freely. Which room could be entered and which room could not? Dead corner. Soon, the two came to the first floor without any risk. Su Cheng stood in the empty hall on the first floor, suddenly he was overwhelmed. We, just come down like this? Why is it a little unreal? He followed Wen Jianyan in a daze, walked through the hall, and came to the closed door of the dormitory building. The young man in front of him suddenly stopped walking. What's wrong? Su Cheng was startled, he stepped forward and tried to push the door. The iron gate remained untouched. He clenched his hand tightly again and pressed down, but the hand was firmly stuck in place. Locked tightly. No, it's okay, the key must be nearby. Su Cheng stared at the door, stepped back slowly, and said calmly. Although he is still a newcomer, he has played quite a few horror decryption games. According to the routine, a locked door always has a corresponding key, but players need to find it. It must be so. I'll go over there to look for it, Officer Su, you. While Su Cheng was talking, he turned his head and looked at the young man standing beside him. Only half of the words got stuck in his throat. Crack. The door lock made a crisp sound, and then slowly opened to the outside. Su Cheng was dumbfounded, staring speechlessly at the young man who was getting up beside him. Ah, the key! Wen Jianyan seemed to have noticed the horrified look in the other party's eyes. He put the wire back into his pocket, turned his face slightly, and said nonchalantly, I don't need it now. The young man smiled slightly, standing upright between light and shade, with a slender figure and clear and magnanimous eyes. Su Cheng opened his mouth and said dryly, Haha, your police school still teaches this. There is a happy atmosphere in the live broadcast room. Ha 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 I know. Come, let's start, let's bet on whether the other side can break through the host's deception. I think it should be okay. How can the police academy teach such obscene things? You don't look like a good person at first sight. Wen Jianyan's expression remained unchanged. Our training is to deal with unexpected situations that may arise. He pointed to the stairs behind him, and changed the topic, including being constantly alert to your surroundings. I saw the dark light flickering in the stairwell, shadows faintly imprinted on the wall, changing shapes silently, and faint footsteps could be heard faintly. Su Cheng was startled, and subconsciously turned his head and grabbed Wen Jianyan's arm. Someone is here, go. Wen Jianyan smiled silently, yes. The two left the dormitory quickly, and quickly restored the door behind it to its original appearance. At this moment, a ding sounded in the ears of both of them at the same time. Congratulations to the host for leaving the dormitory. Main task: leave the dormitory after lights out and explore the campus. Completion: 50% reward points, 5,000. Su Cheng could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Great, it looks like he made the right choice. He turned his head and glanced at Wen Jianyan, who was not far away, and a trace of gratitude for the rest of his life flashed in his heart. Thanks to meeting this important NPC and entering this seemingly critical plot line, otherwise he would have been in danger long ago, either being chased by monsters, or struggling under the countdown that is gradually approaching. He looked squarely at the young man in front of him, and asked cautiously, Officer Su, where are we going next? 4th floor of the teaching building. The key to the locker that Su Yuan left for him points there. Wen Jianyan took a deep look at Su Cheng, and said softly, also, I sneaked in as an ordinary person. You don't need to call me Officer Su. You are the same age as my sister, so you can call me Brother Wen from now on. Although his tone was calm, his voice was very heavy, as if there was some kind of complicated emotion hidden deep inside. Even though he knew that the other party was an NPC, Su Cheng couldn't help being touched. At this moment, the background story that the other party just told him briefly seemed to become vivid and concrete. Ah! What a touching brother-sister relationship! However, according to the routine of horror movies, I'm afraid, alas. A trace of unbearableness flashed across Su Cheng's face. Okay, Brother Wen. Su Cheng took a deep breath and said solemnly, don't worry, I will definitely help you find your sister. An ellipsis floated across the barrage. Good guy, he got in the way again. I thought he was going to be suspicious, but I didn't expect him to be more convinced now. It's outrageous. Where is the sister? No sister. Wake up, Anchor, this liar made up all of this. Crash.jpg, routines, all routines. Asterisk the first floor of the dormitory building. The shadows printed on the wall gradually solidified, and the sound of chaotic footsteps resounded in the stairwell. Several embarrassed figures appeared in the hall. Oh shit! One of the anchors said with lingering fear, this monster is too fierce. If I hadn't thrown a prop in time, I might have capsized in the gutter. The other looked equally distressed, I remember that this is not a copy of level. This difficulty is not right. It's really a bit high. One of the anchors guessed, speaking of. Could it be related to the NPC that the old hag was looking for? Kong Shixing frowned and interrupted their conversation, let's not mention this, the most important thing now is to find the key to the gate. The three of them dispersed and began to search for the location of the key on the first floor of the hall. One of the anchors buried his head in his search under the table. When he raised his head, he was so frightened by a figure that suddenly bumped into his view that he almost went into cardiac arrest. A solitary human silhouette stood in the stairwell, surrounded by the pale light, and suddenly looked like a ghost. The figure slowly took 2 steps forward, and its entire face was exposed to the light. It's you. The anchor couldn't help but startled. The opponent's figure and facial features are very familiar, and he is a newcomer anchor who has seen more than one time in the dungeon. Kong Shixing heard the movement and walked out of the duty room. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and his eyes fell on the uninvited guest. What's wrong? I want to team up with you. said the man. The fear on his face was still there, his face was pale, and his voice trembled. Let me join you. The anchor who just talked to the man winked at Kong Shixing. Kong Shixing said without changing his face, you can act with us if you want to, but you must obey our orders unconditionally, and you can't hold us back. The man nodded hurriedly, okay, okay. In the dungeon, the basic survival time is very valuable, not only has more opportunities for trial and error, but also can transfer the time to other anchors, that is to say, it can be plundered, traded, and deceived. Experienced anchors generally keep their initial survival time strictly confidential. If there are too many words, it is easy to be targeted, and if there are too few words, it means that he is approaching danger, and it will be easier to be alerted and alienated. The reason why they have an impression of this anchor is because, as a novice anchor who has lived too long, he is too high profile. If it was just an ordinary level dungeon, they generally would not consider this method. After all, if the other party is not killed in the end, they will definitely have a deep hatred. However, now this copy. There is always a feeling that something is beyond their expectations and mastery. Well, it's always good to have a health pack in the team. A hint of greed flashed in Kong Shixing's eyes. May I have your name? On the dirty glass of the duty room, the figure of the man was vaguely reflected. His face was pale and stiff, the corners of his mouth were slowly parted and raised, revealing a distorted and exaggerated smile. Cheng Huiquan. The man answered. It was completely dark. The thick darkness is like a living thing, swallowing the entire campus. The street lamps were flickering, only illuminating a small pale area, the edges of the buildings were blurred and far away, and shadows loomed silently at the edge of sight. Leaving the evening, the current campus seems to have fallen into another dimension. Wen Jianyan looked up at the teaching building in front of him. There is no light in the dark windows, lifeless and submerged in the night, as if something is swaying in the shadows, watching from the windows. There is no one in the dead building, and the inexplicable sense of oppression makes one's heart chill. Su Cheng couldn't help but swallowed his saliva, holding on to the last unrealistic hope. He asked with a trembling voice, is it here? Wen Jianyan. I hate to admit it, but he nodded blankly. After receiving an affirmative answer, the last glimmer of hope in Su Cheng's heart was also shattered. He stared at the teaching building in front of him with a mournful face, and the cold sweat on his back broke out layer after layer. This ghostly place, you can tell that there is nothing good in it at a glance. Wen Jianyan deeply felt the same way. But the task was in hand, and there was no way to retreat, so he had no choice but to bite the bullet and step forward, saying in a well-trained and calm voice, let's go. Su Cheng looked at the back of his companion who had suddenly grown taller, and couldn't help being respectful. As expected of an upright public servant of the people, he can give people such a strong sense of security even in a terrorist live broadcast. He took a deep breath and mustered up the courage to follow. The teaching building was too quiet, and only the footsteps of two people could be heard in the empty and dead corridor. Su Cheng followed closely behind Wen Jianyan, his gaze drifting to both sides. Suddenly, he froze. In the dark classroom, the dim light of street lamps in the distance can be vaguely seen. Several black silhouettes were outlined by the light, and the shadows stood motionless side by side silently. With a blank face, Su Cheng quickened his pace and approached Wen Jianyan, stretched out his hand and tugged on the other's sleeve, and said in a low voice, Teach, there seems to be someone in the classroom. Not necessarily people. Wen Jianyan didn't raise her head, and said as fast as she could, Don't look, lower your head, and walk forward quickly. Su Cheng's scalp was numb and he nodded hastily. The two continued to move forward, accompanied by the chaotic drumbeat of the heartbeat, and the sound of hollow footsteps echoed in the corridor, faster and faster. Soon, the classroom was left far behind. Before Su Cheng could breathe a sigh of relief, those silhouettes reappeared in the next classroom. They were still side by side, but this time they were closer. Next room. Next room. Every step forward, the silhouette takes a step forward, and the weird shadow gradually enlarges, as if it is slowly approaching. There were faint and strange sounds in my ears, like low laughter, or malicious whispers. Those meaningless syllables came from the distance of the corridor, approaching little by little, approaching run. When Jianyan stopped drinking. The moment the voice fell, the two ran desperately. The edge of the line of sight was blurred, but the black figure could still be seen relentlessly approaching, and approaching again. In the end, the shadow that had been fully enlarged to a normal height was clinging to the window near the corridor, as if it would leave the classroom and come to the corridor in a second. Those strange, rustling human voices were amplified again and again, hovering in the empty corridor, coming from all directions, but the source of the sound could not be found at all, but it was inexplicably chilling and trembling. This way. The young man running ahead made a sharp turn and dragged Su Cheng into the stairwell. The stairwell was dark and narrow, the green wall paint was peeling off, revealing messy graffiti, and the overhead lights were flickering, making a hissing sound. Other than that, there was dead silence. The whispering died away. The shadows that were gradually approaching did not seem to catch up. Su Cheng leaned against the wall in shock, his voice changed. What are those things? When Jianyan didn't answer. He raised his head and looked at the stairs extending upwards in front of him. The tops of some crooked stairs were engulfed in darkness, seemingly endless. The adrenaline that was generated when he was running wildly just now has disappeared, and the icy chill began to rush from the soles of his feet. Although his face still maintained a well-trained calm and composure, Wen Jianyan began to feel weak in his heart. He really didn't want to go up at all if he could. He remembered the time limit of that mission, pinched the hard outline of the key in his pocket again, gritted his teeth, and squeezed out a few words, "Let's go upstairs." Su Cheng looked at the young man beside him in shock. "This NPC, are you not afraid at all? You have really strong mentality." He opened his mouth. "Praise sincerely. Wen Jianyan. He. Strong, you big head ghost. I have to give it a shot, okay?" The corner of his mouth twitched, and he replied with a half smile, "That's ridiculous." The barrage laughed like crazy. "Ha ha 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 ha. Why is it so funny? What a wonderful and weird comedic effect this is." In a sense, the opposite party did tell the truth. The anchor's psychological quality is indeed very strong, but it's all focused on the direction of telling lies without blinking an eye. But it's true to be afraid of ghosts, ha ha ha. After entering the stairwell, there was no strange sound or appearance along the way. However, once they want to leave the stairwell and enter the corridors of the second and third floors, they will fall into the previous predicament again. Those shadows became clear and approaching. They swarmed in the darkness of the corridors and classrooms, watching them greedily and eagerly, waiting for an opportunity to drag them into the darkness. During the process, Su Cheng secretly took out his ID card and looked at it a few times. He found that every time he entered the realm of the shadows, his remaining survival time would be greatly reduced. It was only a few minutes ago that he entered the teaching building, but nearly half an hour had already been dropped on his identity card. It's been a long time. With a chill on his back, he gave up his desire to explore on the second and third floors. Soon, the fourth floor was in sight. 4. The bright red paintwork of the numbers has faded and peeled off, making it all the more ominous when illuminated by the flickering lights of the hallway. Wen Jianyan took a deep breath slowly, stepped out cautiously, and walked sideways out of the stairwell little by little. It was very quiet in the ear, without the strange whispers and low laughter surrounding it. Voice-activated lights come on one by one, illuminating the empty corridor. There are no shadows. To be precise, nothing happened after leaving the stairwell. Compared with the other 3 floors, it was simply too peaceful and simple. But Wen Jianyan didn't feel any relief. There are only 2 possibilities for how quiet this place is. One is that those shadows were trying to force them to the fourth floor from the beginning, and the other is that there are some more vicious things here, and even they dare not approach here. No matter what it is not easy to deal with. The cool light overhead is steady and constant. The empty corridor stretched out to both sides, and the end was swallowed by darkness. There were no obvious signs on the classrooms on both sides, so we had to go to confirm them one by one. When Jianyan turned to look at Su Cheng, "Let's find room 408 separately. If you encounter any abnormalities, don't act rashly and call me loudly." Su Cheng was startled for a moment, then nodded quickly, "No problem." To be honest, in such a weird place, acting separately was the last thing he wanted to do. After all, acting alone is the law of death in horror movies. But now Su Cheng has to quickly confirm the remaining points and duration on his identity card, and then buy life-saving props from the store, so the other party's proposal is exactly what he wants. After parting with Wen Jianyan, Su Cheng heaved a sigh of relief, turned around and walked to the side corridor. Great, what he's going to do next can't be seen by that NPC, which is not only difficult to explain, but also likely to attract suspicion. While thinking, he opened the live broadcast panel. But what Su Cheng didn't know was that in a place he couldn't see, that NPC himself was doing exactly the same thing as him. Open the live panel. It's been a long time since the live broadcast panel was opened here. As soon as Wen Jianyan entered, he saw an overwhelming barrage of bullets, and was a little overwhelmed for a while. Oh, the anchor has opened the barrage. Reward points 50 anchor. Look here. I love the style of the anchor, confession in the front row. He took the time to look at the number of people online in the live broadcast room. Good guy, last time there were only more than 2,000 people, and now it has doubled, almost approaching 6,000 people. Wen Jianyan glanced at the barrage. The previous wave of enthusiasm has passed, and the rest of the barrage content has become more nutritious. Some are enthusiastic, some are indifferent, some are malicious, and some are suspicious. Of course, most of them are watching the show with great interest, and can't extract any particularly effective information from it. This barrage has no use value. There is no need for any interaction, but it can't be too obvious. Thanks. The handsome young man smiled, lowered his eyes, let the long eyelashes cover the shimmering eyes, he lightly pressed his fingertips on the curved lips, lightly threw a kiss, and said with mouth, "I confess to you too." The previous pretense of indifference and integrity was torn apart, revealing a bit of frivolity and cynicism that did not belong to that false persona. But it's not serious, but with a casual sense of distance, it seems that it's just a casual flirt, but it's just. Inexplicably, it's very insane. Immediately afterwards, the interface was closed without hesitation. The barrage fell into a short blank. Damn, he understands reward points 50. Damn it, this anchor is too proficient in cheating on rewards. Family members, don't be fooled. Reward points 50. Generally speaking, I rarely give rewards to such a new live broadcast room, but reward points 50. The anchor's mouth, you deceitful ghost. Reward points 100. Hearing the sound of jingling points arriving in his ears, Wen Jianyan happily opened the store interface. Perhaps due to the increase in point savings, there are more interfaces opened in the store this time. After careful selection, Wen Jianyan added a life-saving item to the shopping cart. After all, there may be danger in the future, so it is necessary to get insurance in advance. He stared at the store interface and thought for a while, then added something to the shopping cart. Guiding hand. Although the price of this thing is not cheap, as time goes by, its necessity becomes stronger and stronger. Wen Jianyan has now collected the hidden objects of the difficult level, and the hidden object mission of the legendary level is also in progress. Seeing that victory is in sight, there is only one hidden object of the ordinary level. In this case, if you don't collect all the hidden items in this dungeon, you will be really sorry for yourself who is working so hard. Wen Jianyan clicked to place an order. Props have been put into the backpack. The system prompt sounded, and seeing the 7,000 points in his account being quickly debited, his heart couldn't help but ache. Hurry up, there are dozens of minutes left before the points can be settled again. Wen Jianyan comforted herself in her heart. At this moment, Su Cheng's voice came from behind, "Here, 408 is here." When Jianyan came back to his senses, he closed the interface, turned around and walked towards Su Cheng's position. Su Cheng pointed to a faded iron sheet pasted on the closed door in front of him. Sure enough, this was the room he was looking for. When Jianyan nodded, took a step forward, and put her hand on the doorknob. The cold metal touch came from the palm, and a chill spread, making him shiver slightly. He took a deep breath and was about to press his palm down when suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind like lightning. When Jianyan was startled, her eyes widened slightly. Etc. He looked over his shoulder. This is the 4th floor, the second room on the right. That's right, what I saw from the dormitory building, the scary figure standing in the teaching building with his face pressed against the window, seems to be in the same room as. The second room is on the right side of the 4th floor. When Jianyan's gaze fell on the door in front of him. On the iron sheet, the bright red paint print faded slightly. That's it. 408. Chapter 10. When Jianyan felt a chill rising from the solace of his feet. What's wrong? Seeing him not moving for a long time, Su Cheng asked nervously. When Jianyan collected himself, and replied in a voice that did not fluctuate as much as possible, "It's nothing. No matter what, you still have to get in." He took a deep breath and pressed down on the doorknob with force, only to hear a crisp click. The door lock was unscrewed and slid inward along the force. It was pitch black inside the door. Thick shadows flowed irregularly, shrouding everything in unknown darkness. The light in the corridor poured in through the opening of the door, barely dispelling the shadows and illuminating a corner of the room. Very close to the door, there was a dark figure standing steadily. When Jianyan was startled, he took a few steps back, away from the door. Su Cheng let out a trembling cry from his throat, and then was pushed back violently. He stumbled back and almost tripped himself. The door panel, which lost control, made a creaking sound, and slowly opened inward. With the light in the corridor, more figures can be seen standing in the room. Either high or low, far or near, motionless, silently standing in the shadows, as if they have already merged with the darkness. Looking at it suddenly, one can't help but feel scalp numb. Su Cheng heard his teeth chattering, a layer of cold sweat broke out on his back, his body tensed up, and he was ready to run away immediately. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of the person beside him suddenly moving. Su Cheng's heart touched his throat. Don't, as if the young man didn't hear it, he didn't look back, but took a step forward and walked straight forward. His footsteps were very light, and he couldn't hear the slightest sound when he landed on the ground. His slender figure was tightly bowed, like some kind of feline animal ready to go. He walked forward cautiously, getting closer to the room step by step. Not far away, in the blurred boundary of light and shadow, those figures stood silently in the depths of the room, one by one silhouettes overlapped with shadows, dark, like faces peeping out, watching them silently, patiently waiting for the prey to fall into the trap. Su Cheng's brain was so nervous that it seemed to explode. He held his breath subconsciously, and looked at the scene in front of him with trepidation. Soon, when Jianyan walked to the door, he didn't step into the room rashly, but put one side of his arm against the wall, ensuring that most of his body remained outside the room, and then stretched out a hand into the darkness, groping on the wall inside the room. Su Cheng heard himself gasp. Slap! There was a soft sound. The lights turned on, dispelling the heavy darkness and instantly illuminating the entire room. Under the light, everything is invisible. There are no tables and chairs in the huge classroom, and there are several easels in a mess. The plaster statues in different poses stand in different corners of the classroom, quietly and motionless. Su Cheng was taken aback. It turns out, those shadows are plaster statues? The terrifying shadows gradually approaching on the first 3 floors, and the 4th floor was too empty. Under the hint of such an atmosphere, he didn't think in a harmless direction at all. The sudden impact of the facts made him a little dazed, as if his breath was hanging on his chest and he couldn't get it off. Wen Jianyan let out a breath slowly. His palm was wet and sticky. Just now, at the moment when his body turned around to escape, his brain was habitually thinking rationally and clearly. If this room is open to kill, then this so-called hidden object opening task is impossible to complete. In addition, from some details in Su Yuan's diary, it can be seen that she is an art student studying fine arts. Wen Jianyan had a vague guess about the dark shadow in the room, so he acted decisively. Su Cheng regained his composure. He stepped forward, raised his hand and patted Wen Jianyan half in amazement and half with emotion. A cow. In such a weird atmosphere just now, he was able to observe calmly and make accurate judgments. He deserves to be a trained professional. Wen Jianyan almost staggered when he was photographed, his expression almost tensed. Although he guessed that there should be no serious danger in the room, it doesn't mean he isn't afraid. It's still a little weak. Fortunately, he was still holding on to the wall, so he didn't reveal his true cowardice. With a sullen face, Wen Jianyan said inscrutably, "Go in and have a look." Su Cheng nodded. The lights in the room were turned on, and every corner was clearly visible, and the previous fear finally dissipated. He took the lead in walking inward. Su Cheng, who was walking forward, didn't see that behind him, a young man with a serious face just now supported the wall, turned his left foot and right foot upside down, and secretly moved his numb legs. Only then did he follow up. "Brother Wen, what is the number of the locker you are looking for?" Su Cheng stood in front of a row of lockers at the end of the room and asked in a raised voice. 368. Wen Jianyan replied. Su Cheng quickly glanced around the locker in front of him, his eyes lit up, and he pointed to the corner of the room, "Here." At this moment, Wen Jianyan has completely recovered her previous expressionless and indifferent appearance. He walked forward in the direction Su Cheng pointed, stood still in front of the cabinet, and took out the key from his pocket. The rusted key slipped into the keyhole tightly, and with a soft click, the cabinet door popped open. Wen Jianyan took a deep breath slowly and opened the door of the locker. A strange smell of blood came over his face, causing him to turn his face slightly sideways, subconsciously holding his breath. Wen Jianyan got used to the smell and looked into the cabinet. The inside surface of the cabinet was covered with rough black and red lines, which looked eerie and weird under the light from behind. In the cabinet, the white bone products were wound into a circle, like some kind of weird altar, and in the center of the circle lay a pile of soft and trampled furry things, with brown blood scabs on the brown fur, and the smell of rancidity. The smell escaped from here. It was a raw cat skin. Wen Jianyan's scalp felt numb. "Good guy, this is Su Yuan's cabinet. The things inside are too evil." "Impossible. It must be the cabinet of the person who took over Su Yuan's identity. Look at the cat's skin, it must have been peeled off by that person." "Wait, didn't I remember that Su Yuan said in that diary that she heard a ticking sound coming from the bedside? Could it be because the person who pretended to be her was holding a skinned cat, and all she heard was the sound of blood dripping? My hairs are growing and I'm starting to get irritated. Speaking of which, I just spent points to exchange for a plot reminder. This storyline happened the earliest in the entire school, and it is also related to S-level hidden objects. It is estimated that this line may involve the core of the entire dungeon. Gone. Fuck. He shouldn't be able to unlock 100% of the first copy. Hank or NB. At this moment, Wen Jianyan's eyes were attracted by a corner deep in the cabinet. It was a small crumpled black leather book, very thin, and the pages at the edge were rolled up, revealing the inside stained with brown blood. Wen Jianyan reached in and took out the notebook, and began to flip through it quickly. Su Cheng stood aside, covering his nose with one hand to block the stench. Strong curiosity drove him to step forward, and looked into the cabinet with his head. However, before he saw anything, there seemed to be something moving slightly in the background from the corner of his eye. Su Cheng jumped up like a frightened bird, and turned his head to look behind him. The room was very quiet. Bright lights streamed from overhead, illuminating dried paint on the floor, easels covered in white cloth, and motionless plaster figures. There is no shadow, no place to hide, everything is visible. All I could hear was the sound of pages turning from Wen Jianyan's side. However, inexplicably, Su Cheng felt his nerves gradually tense up, and cold sweat leaked from his palms, and his sense of crisis was no less than when he was in the corridor just now. No, even stronger. He forced himself to scan the empty classroom in front of him. Etc. Those plaster statues, were they in this position just now? Those plaster statues facing different directions, I don't know when it started. Chi faced this side. The cold light fell from the top of the head and fell on the facial features of the plaster statue, casting a deep shadow on it. Pale faces and pairs of eye sockets without pupils silently looked in this direction. Although they were still motionless, Su Cheng no longer dared to treat them as harmless decorations. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty, and opened his mouth. I said. Su Cheng was taken aback by his hoarse and outrageous voice. Wen Jianyan lowered her head and read the little book in her hand seriously. The more he looked, the more he frowned. He turned the page with one hand, and carefully moved the circular animal bones in the cabinet with the other hand, so focused that he didn't hear Su Cheng's call at all. Su Cheng said in a slightly distorted voice, "Should we go?" Wen Jianyan paused and pulled out of the state of concentration. At this moment, there was a sudden and clear sound behind the ear tick. He was slightly taken aback, and subconsciously turned his head to look in the direction of the sound. I saw that a lot of blood began to ooze from under the cat's skin at some point, and the red and smelly blood slowly overflowed from the bone area and dripped down the edge of the cabinet tick. It appears that the altar was successfully destroyed. Although everything is going smoothly according to his idea, but... Looking at the blood dripping on the ground, Wen Jianyan still couldn't help feeling a little shuddering. Whether what you did was right or wrong can only be judged later. At this time, Su Cheng's changed voice came again, that Wen Jianyan turned his head to look. In the next second, he almost forgot to breathe, and his back felt numb. Looking around, plaster statues stood motionless in the room, all blocking the route leading to the outside. Pale faces looked straight in this direction, and the door was clearly close at hand. It looks so far away. Are there so many plaster statues just now? Crack. There was a slight cracking sound of stones. The face of the plaster statue was cracked with thin lines, as if something was trying to break free from below. Crack. The snow-white plaster debris fell down, and the arm of the plaster statue was raised little by little. The cracks at the joints were getting bigger and bigger, and it stretched out its hand towards the two people. Su Cheng's face was pale, and he raised his legs and was about to rush out with his head buried. A strong force came from behind, pulling him back. Wait! Su Cheng was stunned, and subconsciously looked towards the place where he was just about to land. The ground turned soft grey-white at some point, and there was something faintly agitating beneath it. Like melted plaster. Seeing Su Cheng retreating, the face of the plaster statue showed a look of disappointment for some reason. Su Cheng felt cold all over. He now knows what is sealed in the plaster statue. Once stepped on, he will be dragged in and become a member of this group of castes. The plaster statue moved more and more, and the finely divided plaster powder fell, and as soon as it hit the ground, it would immediately dye that small area into a soft and strange off-white. The ground deformed and squirmed, and more plaster statues crawled out from under the ground. More and more, more and more. There was a sigh in the bullet screen, and the atmosphere of enthusiasm and frenzy before suddenly changed, leaving only the voice of shouting. Tisk tisk tisk, it's over. This wave is going to be wiped out. Oh, it's a pity, although there were players who came to this classroom before, he was the first one to get this level item mission of this dungeon. Isn't it? When the next anchor who finds clues appears, I don't know what year and month it will be. Come on, don't feel sorry for the front. If it wasn't for the fact that the anchor spent too long checking the cabinets just now, this group of casts has grown so much that there is almost nowhere to set foot on the ground, otherwise how could the group be wiped out? That's right, this anchor passed the first few levels by luck, so he really thinks he is some awesome character? I have already seen that this kind of flamboyant anchor always wants to go out of the ordinary way. Basically, they don't live very long. Wen Jianyan was ignorant of the change in the barrage's attitude. He stared at the grey swamp that was about to spread on the ground, with a thoughtful look on his face. Without warning, he moved, but not in the direction of the front door that was about to be blocked. The young man stretched his long legs, turned around and rushed towards the back door of the classroom. One of the plaster statues noticed his movement, and raised its arm more agilely than before. More lines were cracked on its joints, and its pale 5 fingers suddenly stretched out towards Wen Jianyan's back. Before it touches, Wen Jianyan snapped. The lights in the room suddenly went out. The light source disappeared, leaving only a thick darkness in front of my eyes. Su Cheng stood helplessly in the darkness. He couldn't hear or see anything, he had nothing to defend himself, and he had no way to escape. He could only pant in despair and helplessly, waiting for death quietly. Advent. Time passed by every minute and every second. The darkness is as thick as a liquid, like a black cloth covering the eyes, only the sound of his own chaotic heartbeat can be heard in the ears, other than that, there is a dead silence. Su Cheng noticed something was wrong. The click sound that the group of plaster statues made when they were moving also disappeared, as if they lost power the moment the light was lost. Thinking of this, Su Cheng boldly raised his voice a little, "Little brother Wen? Are you over there?" In the distance, a muffled hum came from the other end of the classroom. The plaster statue moves, relying on the light source. Su Cheng guessed. It looks like it should be. Wen Jianyan leaned against the back door and let out a breath slowly. The barrage that was predicting Wen Jianyan's death just now fell silent. After a few seconds, several puzzled barrages slowly drifted past. I don't understand, how did the anchor find out? Do you need to turn on the light when you enter the door? Are there too few clues? Did he use some props just now? I don't believe that a human being can deduce this through normal means. Wen Jianyan opened his anchor panel. Uncommonly, he didn't go directly to look at the barrage this time, but opened his backpack. Just at the critical moment of life and death, a voice rang in Wen Jianyan's ear, "The function of the novice gift package has taken effect." The moment the voice fell, his vision suddenly lit up for a moment. In the next second, a line of translucent small characters appeared above the head of the nearest plaster statue in front of him, a plaster statue made of corpses and resentment. Activation method, light on the semi-transparent virtual screen. The apple seedling had already shot up high at some point. The moment it appeared, a pure white apple blossom fell from the top and disappeared completely before landing. The first stage of growth has been achieved. Flower of destroying illusion 1 remaining quantity, 0. Sorry, live broadcast room, I blamed you wrongly. The novice gift bag you sent is still useful, I swear, I will never call it a junk thing again. Wen Jianyan thought very sincerely. But, although the plaster statue is temporarily unable to move, it does not mean that the crisis is over. He'd tried it just now, and the back door wouldn't open from the inside, the only way out was the front door. Avoiding plaster statues and swamps on the ground is already extremely difficult in the light, and it is almost impossible to do in the dark. Obviously, Su Cheng also thought of this. He raised his voice tremblingly, "That. Brother Wen, what shall we do next?" Wen Jianyan. "Well, that's a good question, and I'd love to know the answer to it too. At this moment, he suddenly felt something wet rubbing against his ankle, cold and sticky, which made Wen Jianyan's skin goosebumps instantly. He shivered and stiffened. Meow! A thin cat meow came from under my feet. Wen Jianyan was stunned. Ziazhu! He tentatively opened his mouth and called. The wet, bloody, furless little thing rubbed more enthusiastically, meow meow. It bit Wen Jianyan's trousers and dragged him in a certain direction. Wen Jianyan instantly blesses her heart. In front of his eyes was the darkness that could not be seen, as if he was struggling to stick his head out in a suffocating swamp. He moved his steps cautiously, following the tiny force at his feet, step by step, moving forward cautiously. His toe hit something hard and there was a soft bang. It doesn't look like plaster, but it looks like some kind of wooden frame. Meow meow. The little things at the feet urged. Wen Jianyan paused, then slowly raised her hand, reaching into the darkness in front of her. Fingertips touched the rough, soft cloth. Appears to be an easel? Wen Jianyan had a premonition in his heart. He grabbed a corner of the canvas. The next second, there was a ferocious and ear-piercing scream from behind. The intense venom and evil caused the temperature of the air to plummet, like invisible thorns piercing his back. Wen Jianyan gritted her teeth, exerted force with her hands, and slammed the white cloth covering the easel off. The sharp screams, as if scratching the glass with fingernails, soared again, accompanied by the explosion of hard objects and the fierce sound of stones falling to the ground. I don't know how long it has been. Hearing only two sounds of zi, the lights above his head flickered twice, and then slowly recovered. This time, it was no longer bright and dazzling at first, but like the third floor downstairs, dim and pale, flickering due to unstable current. The room was empty, all the plaster statues had exploded into pieces all over the floor, and white dust with a smell was floating in the air. Wen Jianyan lowered her head and looked at the canvas in front of her. There is a young girl painted on the canvas, delicate and fair, with dark shoulder-length hair and clear eyes, smiling shyly with her lips pursed at the moment. He reached out and touched the canvas. Soft, delicate, with a kind of uncomfortable strange touch. Like human skin. Ding! Congratulations to the anchor for finding Su Yuan's face. Bonus points, 5,000. Hidden object, epic, mission update, return Su Yuan's face to its original owner. Main task, leave the dormitory after lights out and explore the campus. Completion, 100% bonus points, 5,000 dungeon exploration degree, 71% bonus points, 5,000. The second after this number appeared, a burst of elegant and melodious music rang in Wen Jianyan's ears, pulling him out of his thoughts abruptly. He raised his head blankly. What's the situation? Why did the piano music suddenly start playing? Congratulations to the anchor of 789326QWK. You will soon be able to break the exploration record of the dungeon Decay Middle School. The mechanical voice changed from normal and announced beamingly, you are about to make history. At this moment, outside the square, in the dungeon hall of Decay Middle School, one of the live broadcast rooms suddenly popped up, jumped from the spot in the hall, and jumped directly to the end of the special recommended single list. This position seems inconspicuous, but it made the audience who have been paying attention to this list stunned at the same time. In this special list, dungeons are never recommended, and only the anchors with the most outstanding performance in the dungeon, and even the most likely to break the internal record of the dungeon, are selected, and they are removed from the dungeon hall and placed on the entire live broadcast plaza. The audience became interested and stepped forward to watch, but they were dumbfounded when they saw the name of the live broadcast room. 789326QWK? What kind of bad name is this? Or? The gathered audience thought of a possibility at the same time, and were immediately dumbfounded. Wait, is this host who was selected by the system and is likely to break the record, or a newcomer who hasn't had time to change the name of the live broadcast room?